"Scrub that floor! You useless brat, you're going hungry tonight!" My daughter-in-law hissed through her teeth, her voice cutting through the damp, cold bathroom. I froze on the threshold of my son's house, my heart dropping when I saw my granddaughter on her knees, her tiny hands red and raw from chemicals. My daughter-in-law's two sons had their feet up on the sofa, snickering. When she saw me, she gave a thin smile and tossed out, "She needs to learn responsibility and discipline, Mom." I looked at my poor motherless granddaughter, soaked and grimy, and my chest tightened. The home I trusted my son and his wife to keep had become a place that was swallowing my granddaughter whole. From that moment, I knew I was stepping into a war the stepmother had started, and I would be the one to make her burn herself down. If you're still listening, tell me where you're watching from. Every comment you leave is another mark in this journey. And if this story has touched you, don't forget to hit like so it can reach even further. My name is Sharon Whitaker, 70 years old, living in Columbus, Ohio. All my life I've believed in kindness, but age taught me something more important. Kindness doesn't mean complicity. I raised my son, Noah, with all the gentleness and patience I had. But today, standing in this house, I saw a stark truth. The values I once passed to him had been twisted beyond recognition. The living room reeked of bleach. Damp streaks on the tile reflected Lila's small shadow, 9 years old, hair a mess, shirt soaked and clinging to her back. Her tiny hands were swollen and red, sliced with hairline cracks like cuts from a blade. I'd seen those hands hold crayons, trembling as she wrote, "I love Grandma" on the first Christmas card after her mother died. Now those same hands were scrubbing floors, shaking with fear. "What is going on here, Vanessa?" I asked, holding my voice steady. She turned back with that paper-thin smile, blonde hair yanked into a high ponytail, each strand glossy like nothing at all was wrong. "Just teaching her responsibility, Mom. She's messy. At this age, she should be helping the adults." I shifted my gaze to my son Noah, sitting in the corner, the newspaper hiding half his face. "Noah?" I called. He glanced up with an awkward smile. "Mom, Vanessa's right. Lila needs to learn independence. She should help around the house." I bit down, my throat going dry. "Help? By kneeling to scrub a bathroom with hands that torn up?" Vanessa shrugged, casual, like it was normal. "Kids need boundaries, Mom. Sharon. Your era was different. It's different now." The words hit me like cold water. I looked around. Vanessa's two boys, Mason, 12, and Toby, 10, had their feet on the table, watching TV and chomping snacks, not lifting a finger. "And these two? They don't need to learn responsibility?" I asked, soft but sharp as a blade. Vanessa let out a small, arrogant laugh. "They did their part. Now it's her turn." I turned to Lila. She shook her head hard, tears spilling. "That's not true, Grandma. I've been doing this since morning." Vanessa jumped in shrill. "She's lying. You know she has an attitude problem. She plays weak so she can get out of chores." I took a long breath, fighting the urge to explode. "This child is my granddaughter, Vanessa, and I don't recall authorizing you to teach her with cheap insults." Vanessa tilted her head, smiling like we were girlfriends, not mother-in-law and daughter-in-law. "Oh, Sharon, I'm just helping Lila become a better person. You should let the kids grow up and stop interfering." The room went still. I looked to Noah again. He wouldn't meet my eyes, fiddling with the paper to avoid me. Lila's head bowed, tears dotted the tile. And in that moment, I understood. My son's silence was as cruel as Vanessa's screaming. I walked to Lila and lifted her hands. "Does it hurt, honey?" She nodded. I could see the tiny fissures in her skin, the chemical burns peeling it away in white flakes. I looked around, wet rag, plastic bucket, bottle of cleaner, the wall clock reading 3:47 p.m. Every detail I logged in my mind, a case file taking shape. "That's enough, Vanessa," I said, low but firm. "From now on, she's not doing housework." Vanessa folded her arms and scoffed. Sorry, but this is my and Noah's house. I decide how we parent here. I looked her straight in the eye and answered slowly. Actually, you're parenting her in my house. Her face flickered, then smoothed over. Don't joke. Noah bought this place. I smiled faintly and said nothing. She didn't know every brick in this house, every cent of the mortgage, was under my name, which meant I could take it back whenever I wanted. I put my hand on Lila's shoulder. Go change your clothes. I'm taking you to dinner. No. Vanessa shot up. She isn't done. She doesn't get to eat. I turned back, my tone calm enough to scare. What did you just say? Vanessa stepped back, eyes darting. I just meant, don't say another word. I cut her off, took my granddaughter's hand and walked out. I didn't shout. I didn't need to. The room sank into a heavy silence. When the door closed behind me, I knew I'd shut one chapter of endurance and opened another, the fight for justice. That night, alone at my desk in my small apartment by the Scioto River, a warm desk lamp lit a stack of old files. Inside were all the documents for the Whitaker Family Fund Trust and the house mortgage in my name. When Noah married Vanessa 3 years ago, I hid that fact so my son could believe he'd built his own home. Now I saw it, my kindness had made a monster. I turned each page and read the clause carefully. The grantor may suspend or terminate funding upon determining any unethical conduct that harms the beneficiary's welfare. I pressed my lips together. This was the legal lever I needed. My phone buzzed on the table. I pulled up my contacts and found Atticus Reed, the attorney who helped me set up the trust. Atticus, I need to see you as soon as possible. It's family. It's serious. His voice was warm but alert. Tomorrow, 8 a.m., my office. Bring every document. I'll be there, I said, and hung up. Then I pulled a small, old voice recorder from the drawer and plugged it in to charge. I knew I'd need it. Every visit, I'd keep it in my purse on auto record. I'd photograph each injury on Lila's hands, every insult Vanessa hurled. I wasn't the patient, long-suffering mother anymore. I was a grandmother preparing a lawful counterattack. I brewed myself black tea and watched the quiet city through the window, cars humming in the distance. I thought of my first daughter-in-law, Grace, Lila's mother, a gentle soul taken too soon in a car accident. I'd promised I would care for her little girl. Yet here I was, letting that child live in fear in a house I'd built with my own hands. I closed my eyes, guilt and resolve flooding in. Tomorrow, everything would change. The next morning, with mist still draped over the roofs, I drove back to the familiar street. No doorbell. I slid the spare key from an old ring, the one I kept since the house was finished. I opened the door quietly and drew a long breath. The stench of cleaner, cold leftovers and Noah's cigarette smoke thick and stifling. On the table, 3 empty cereal bowls and milk spilled across the surface. Water ran in the kitchen, and that same familiar shout, "Lila, spill it again and forget breakfast." I set my purse down, my finger brushing the recorder's record button. The war had officially begun. Noah used to be a gentle boy, a little clumsy but kind. Once, when he was 10, he tucked a wrinkled note into my bag that read, "I'll never make you sad, Mom." 40 years later, that same boy weighed my heart more than anyone else. After his wife Grace died in a crash 2 years back, I thought time would heal. Lila was 4 then, too young to understand death. I stayed for a year with them. Their tiny house was always warm, laughter in the air, and Lila was sunshine chattering nonstop, drawing chalk rainbows on the driveway. Then Vanessa arrived. She first appeared at Noah's company Christmas party, clutching her 2 sons, Mason, 12, and Toby, 10. Blonde woman, red dress, red lips, eyes sharp as a blade. I still remember how she smiled at Noah, a smile polished in 100 mirrors. 3 months later, they were married. Too fast, too reckless. I didn't object. Partly because I pitied Noah's loneliness, partly because I feared meddling being seen as the mother who won't let her son go. I chose silence, and that was my first mistake. When they moved into the new place in suburban Columbus, I put down the down payment and carried the mortgage through the Whitaker legacy. Trust my husband left. I wanted Noah and my granddaughter to have stability. I hid the details, only saying I'd helped secure a better rate. In truth, I signed every paper. Noah was just a co-resident. I thought kindness would protect my family. But without boundaries, kindness is the sharpest knife. At first, everything looked calm. Vanessa played nice, called me Mom Sharon, sent pictures of family dinners with bright smiles. Months later, I started seeing the signs. Lila, the little girl who used to show me drawings of flowers, fell silent. When I asked, she'd say, "I'm tired." Lila's eyes dodged mine, her small shoulders tucked in like she feared waking something. Once, I turned on the kitchen faucet and she flinched, tears spilling before she could explain. I began paying attention. Every visit, Vanessa had an excuse, Lila's studying, and locked the child's door. Meanwhile, Mason and Toby tore through the house, spilled milk, tossed balls, even broke a potted plant, all with a pat on the presses. Head and boys will be boys. One afternoon I arrived earlier than planned. Without time to prep her fake smile, Vanessa's voice carried from the kitchen. "No eating until every stain is gone, you hear me?" A tiny sob answered. I knew that voice, Lila. When I stepped in, Vanessa switched to sugar like nothing had happened. She wore two faces, one for the world, one for the smaller, weaker child. Later, I spoke to Noah. He sighed. "Mom, don't worry so much. Vanessa's just strict. Lila needs structure, you know that." "Structure?" I frowned. "She's 9, Noah. She doesn't need structure. She needs her dad." He dropped his gaze. "Please don't make me choose. I just want peace." I understood. My son wasn't evil. He was a coward. His indifference was the get-out-of-jail card Vanessa played over and over. I started auditing the family fund. I topped up quarterly. In the report, an odd set of expenses: art classes for Mason and Toby, summer camp tuition, new electronics, all charged to Whitaker Fund Household Children's Development. And Lila? Nothing. Just a few small receipts, workbooks, old supplies, and a small therapy line marked discontinued after 1 month. I remember sitting motionless over that statement for a long time. Every number felt like a blade. This house, this fund, I made them to protect Lila, not to bankroll injustice. That evening, when I brought dinner over, Vanessa greeted me sweetly, honey in her tone. "Oh, Mom Sharon, you didn't have to. You're so thoughtful." But behind her, I saw Lila washing dishes, standing on a low stool, steam fogging her glasses. I said softly, "She shouldn't be washing dishes. Her hands are blistered." Vanessa shrugged. "It's good for her. Girls should learn housework early. Don't worry, I've got it under control." Those last words, "I've got it under control," chilled me. Weeks later, I ran into Dorothy. Lane, the neighbor across the street, a widowed woman in her 60s, kind and perceptive. "Mrs. Sharon, I don't know if I should say this," she lowered her voice, "but I hear yelling from your son's backyard at least twice a week." "Whose voice?" "A woman's the new wife, I think," she yells loud, "and a child cries. Every time." I clenched my bag strap and kept steady. "Thank you, Dorothy. I'll keep an eye out." She nodded with sympathy. That night I sat in my car a few houses down and watched. The kitchen window glowed yellow. Vanessa paced, pointing, hands chopping the air. Lila stood hunched by the sink. Mason and Toby lounged on the sofa with that same smile, the smile of kids who've learned to treat someone else's pain like entertainment. I opened my notebook and logged the times. 6:20 p.m. Shouting. 6:45 p.m. door slams. 7 p.m. lights off. Silence. Each line a mark of blame. I knew, to help Lila, I couldn't just watch. I had to shift the leverage. Until now, Vanessa and Noah believed they controlled everything, the house, the finances, the decisions. But the foundation of it all was in my hands. And if they used that foundation to grind down the child I loved most, I would pull it out. I drew up a careful plan. First, gather evidence. I hid a tiny camera in an old pendant every visit. I switched it on. I photographed Lila's hands, the scatter of small injuries across her skin. I kept the ointment receipts I bought for her myself. I recorded Vanessa's sweet voice when others were around and the knife-edge tone when it was just the two of us and Lila. I told no one, not even Atticus, not yet. I needed time, needed to be sure I wasn't acting on anger alone. But the quieter Lila grew, the more I felt time running out. One evening, as I drove her home after dinner, she whispered in the car, "Grandma, if I do really well, can I call my stepmom Mom?" Such a simple question, and it shattered me. "You don't have to call anyone Mom unless they earn it, sweetheart. Okay?" Lila nodded, eyes shining with tears. I realized I wasn't just fighting a cruel woman. I was fighting a small, closed system of apathy inside that house, power, money, and fear knotted together. In the rear view, I watched Lila fall asleep, head tilted, hands curled around a worn teddy bear. She should have been read a bedtime story, tucked into her father's arms, not worrying about scrubbing floors fast enough to eat dinner. I tightened my grip on the wheel. If her world was warped, I would straighten it. I got home near midnight, pulled out the trust files again. The desk light glinted off the white page. If the grantor confirms unethical conduct harming a minor, the agreement may be terminated immediately. I smiled to myself. "Vanessa," I whispered into the dark, "you think you control everything. You forgot one thing. This house was built by a woman. And she's about to take it all back." Outside the window, a May breeze lifted the curtain. I shut the file, more determined than ever. To save Lila, I had to become stronger than the people holding her captive. And from that moment on, I wasn't the kindly grandmother anymore. I was Sharon Whitaker, about to flip a twisted family upside down. That morning, I woke earlier than usual. A thin fog lay over the quiet street, dawn's pale light not yet touching their roof. In my coat pocket, the tiny camera blinked red, the silent weapon I'd charged the night before. I drove slow, parked a few houses away, turned off the engine, and sat a few extra minutes in the dark. My heart pounded not from fear, but because I knew the truth would surface this morning. I opened the gate and slid the spare key into the lock. The soft click sounded a small noise, but enough to make me feel I had crossed a new line, from a mother who stayed quiet to a woman ready to act. Inside, the house held the chill of early morning. Water ran somewhere, with a small girl's voice in between. I walked toward the kitchen. Lila stood on a tall stool, reaching up to a stack of dirty dishes nearly level with her head. Her tiny hands, swollen and red from chemicals, worked to wash each plate without dropping it. White suds pooled under the dim light. Her oversized sweater sleeves were soaked, brown hair in tangles stuck to her cheeks. I flipped the camera on, my throat tight. A 9-year-old, before school, shouldn't be starting the day with bleach and tears. The door behind me flew open. Vanessa strode in with a pink lunchbox labeled Lila. She popped the lid, glanced at the food, and suddenly dumped the whole thing into the sink, splattering it all over the child's shirt. "Did you stack the meat uneven again?" she hissed. "And what about your brothers, huh? You're always selfish." Lila jumped, dabbing at the sauce on her shirt. "I didn't mean to, I just—" "Shut up! No excuses!" From the living room, Mason leaned off the couch, smug. "Mom, told you she took my part." Toby snorted a laugh, stuffed another cookie in his mouth, eyes glued to the TV. "Scrub that floor, you useless brat, you're going hungry tonight." my daughter-in-law hissed through her teeth, her voice cutting through the damp, cold bathroom. I froze on the threshold of my son's house, my heart dropping when I saw my granddaughter on her knees, her tiny hands red and raw from chemicals. My daughter-in-law's 2 sons had their feet up on the sofa, snickering. When she saw me, she gave a thin smile and tossed out, "She needs to learn responsibility and discipline, Mom." I looked at my poor motherless granddaughter, soaked and grimy, and my chest tightened. The home I trusted my son and his wife to keep had become a place that was swallowing my granddaughter whole. From that moment, I knew I was stepping into a war the DIL stepmother had started, and I would be the one to make her burn herself down. My name is Sharon Whitaker, 70 years old, living in Columbus, Ohio. All my life I've believed in kindness, but age taught me something more important. Kindness doesn't mean complicity. I raised my son, Noah, with all the gentleness and patience I had. But today, standing in this house, I saw a stark truth. The values I once passed to him had been twisted beyond recognition. The living room reeked of bleach. Damp streaks on the tile reflected Lila's small shadow, 9 years old, hair a mess, shirt soaked and clinging to her back. Her tiny hands were swollen and red, sliced with hairline cracks like cuts from a blade. I'd seen those hands hold crayons, trembling as she wrote, "I love Grandma" on the first Christmas card after her mother died. Now those same hands were scrubbing floors, shaking with fear. "What is going on here, Vanessa?" I asked, holding my voice steady. She turned back with that paper-thin smile, blonde hair yanked into a high ponytail, each strand glossy like nothing at all was wrong. "Just teaching her responsibility, Mom. She's messy. At this age, she should be helping the adults." I shifted my gaze to my son Noah, sitting in the corner, the newspaper hiding half his face. "Noah?" I called. He glanced up with an awkward smile. "Mom, Vanessa's right. Lila needs to learn independence. She should help around the house." I bit down, my throat going dry. "Help? By kneeling to scrub a bathroom with hands that torn up?" Vanessa shrugged, casual, like it was normal. "Kids need boundaries, Mom, Sharon. Your era was different. It's different now." The words hit me like cold water. I looked around. Vanessa's 2 boys, Mason, 12, and Toby, 10, had their feet on the table, watching TV and chomping snacks, not lifting a finger. And these 2? They don't need to learn responsibility? I asked. Soft but sharp, as a blade. Vanessa let out a small, arrogant laugh. They did their part. Now it's her turn. I turned to Lila. She shook her head hard, tears spilling. "That's not true, Grandma. I've been doing this since morning." Vanessa jumped in, shrill. "She's lying. You know she has an attitude problem. She plays weak so she can get out of chores." I took a long breath, fighting the urge to explode. "This child is my granddaughter, Vanessa, and I don't recall authorizing you to teach her with cheap insults." Vanessa tilted her head, smiling like we were girlfriends, not mother-in-law and daughter-in-law. "Oh, Sharon, I'm just helping Lila become a better person. You should let the kids grow up and stop interfering." The room went still. I looked to Noah again. He wouldn't meet my eyes, fiddling with the paper to avoid me. Lila's head bowed. Tears dotted the tile. And in that moment, I understood. My son's silence was as cruel as Vanessa's screaming. I walked to Lila and lifted her hands. "Does it hurt, honey?" She nodded. I could see the tiny fissures in her skin, the chemical burns peeling it away in white flakes. I looked around. Wet rag, plastic bucket, bottle of cleaner, the wall clock reading 3:47 p.m. Every detail I logged in my mind, a case file taking shape. "That's enough, Vanessa," I said, low but firm. "From now on, she's not doing housework." Vanessa folded her arms and scoffed. "Sorry, but this is my and Noah's house. I decide how we parent here." I looked her straight in the eye and answered slowly, "Actually, you're parenting her in my house." Her face flickered, then smoothed over. Don't joke. Noah bought this place. I smiled faintly and said nothing. She didn't know every brick in this house, every cent of the mortgage was under my name, which meant I could take it back whenever I wanted. I put my hand on Lila's shoulder. Go change. Your clothes. I'm taking you to dinner. No! Vanessa shot up. She isn't done. She doesn't get to eat. I turned back, my tone calm enough to scare. What did you just say? Vanessa stepped back, eyes darting. I just meant, don't say another word. I cut her off, took my granddaughter's hand and walked out. I didn't shout. I didn't need to. The room sank into a heavy silence. When the door closed behind me, I knew I'd shut one chapter of endurance and opened another, the fight for justice. That night, alone at my desk in my small apartment by the Scioto River, a warm desk lamp lit a stack of old files. Inside were all the documents for the Whitaker Family Fund Trust and the house mortgage in my name. When Noah married Vanessa 3 years ago, I hid that fact so my son could believe he'd built his own home. Now I saw it, my kindness had made a monster. I turned each page and read the clause carefully. The grantor may suspend or terminate funding upon determining any unethical conduct that harms the beneficiary's welfare. I pressed my lips together. This was the legal lever I needed. My phone buzzed on the table. I pulled up my contacts and found Atticus Reed, the attorney who helped me set up the trust. Atticus, I need to see you as soon as possible. It's family. It's serious. His voice was warm but alert. Tomorrow, 8 a.m., my office. Bring every document. I'll be there, I said, and hung up. Then I pulled a small, old voice recorder from the drawer and plugged it into charge. I knew I'd need it. Every visit, I'd keep it in my purse on auto-record. I'd photograph each injury on Lila's hands, every insult Vanessa hurled. I wasn't the patient, long-suffering mother anymore. I was a grandmother preparing a lawful counterattack. I brewed myself black tea and watched the quiet city through the window, cars humming in the distance. I thought of my first daughter-in-law, Grace, Lila's mother, a gentle soul taken too soon in a car accident. I'd promised I would care for her little girl. Yet here I was, letting that child live in fear in a house I'd built with my own hands. I closed my eyes, guilt and resolve flooding in. Tomorrow, everything would change. The next morning, with mist still draped over the roofs, I drove back to the familiar street. No doorbell. I slid the spare key from an old ring, the one I kept since the house was finished. I opened the door quietly and drew a long breath. The stench of cleaner, cold leftovers and Noah's cigarette smoke thick and stifling. On the table, 3 empty cereal bowls and milk spilled across the surface. Water ran in the kitchen and that same familiar shout, "Lila, spill it again and forget breakfast." I set my purse down, my finger brushing the recorder's record button. The war had officially begun. Noah used to be a gentle boy, a little clumsy but kind. Once, when he was 10, he tucked a wrinkled note into my bag that read, "I'll never make you sad, Mom." 40 years later, that same boy weighed my heart more than anyone else. After his wife Grace died in a crash 5 years back, I thought time would heal. Lila was 4 then, too young to understand death. I stayed for a year with them. Their tiny house was always warm, laughter in the air, and Lila was sunshine chattering nonstop, drawing chalk rainbows on the driveway. Then Vanessa arrived. She first appeared at Noah's company Christmas party, clutching her 2 sons, Mason, 12, and Toby, 10. Blonde woman, red dress, red lips, eyes sharp as a blade. I still remember how she smiled at Noah, a smile polished in 100 mirrors. 3 months later they were married. Too fast, too reckless. I didn't object. Partly because I pitied Noah's loneliness, partly because I feared meddling, being seen as the mother who won't let her son go. I chose silence. And that was my first mistake. When they moved into the new place in suburban Columbus, I put down the down payment and carried the mortgage through the Whitaker legacy trust my husband left. I wanted Noah and my granddaughter to have stability. I hid the details, only saying I'd helped secure a better rate. In truth, I signed every paper. Noah was just a co-resident. I thought kindness would protect my family. But without boundaries, kindness is the sharpest knife. At first, everything looked calm. Vanessa played nice, called me Mom Sharon, sent pictures of family dinners with bright smiles. Months later, I started seeing the signs. Lila, the little girl who used to show me drawings of flowers, fell silent. When I asked, she'd say, "I'm tired." Lila's eyes dodged mine, her small shoulders tucked in like she feared waking something. Once, I turned on the kitchen faucet, and she flinched, tears spilling before she could explain. I began paying attention. Every visit, Vanessa had an excuse: Lila's studying, and locked the child's door. Meanwhile, Mason and Toby tore through the house, spilled milk, tossed balls, even broke a potted plant, all with a pat on the head and boys will be boys. One afternoon, I arrived earlier than planned. Without time to prep her fake smile, Vanessa's voice carried from the kitchen. "No eating until every stain is gone. You hear me?" A tiny sob answered. I knew that voice, Lila. When I stepped in, Vanessa switched to sugar like nothing had happened. She wore two faces, one for the world, one for the smaller, weaker child. Later, I spoke to Noah. He sighed. "Mom, don't worry so much. Vanessa's just strict. Lila needs structure, you know that." "Structure?" I frowned. "She's 9, Noah. She doesn't need structure. She needs her dad." He dropped his gaze. "Please don't make me choose. I just want peace." I understood. My son wasn't evil. He was a coward. His indifference was the get-out-of-jail card Vanessa played over and over. I started auditing the family fund. I topped up quarterly. In the report, an odd set of expenses: art classes for Mason and Toby, summer camp tuition, new electronics, all charged to Whitaker Fund Household Children's Development. And Lila? Nothing. Just a few small receipts, workbooks, old supplies, and a small therapy line marked discontinued after 1 month. I remember sitting motionless over that statement for a long time. Every number felt like a blade. This house, this fund, I made them to protect Lila, not to bankroll injustice. That evening, when I brought dinner over, Vanessa greeted me sweetly, honey in her tone. "Oh, Mom Sharon, you didn't have to. You're so thoughtful." But behind her, I saw Lila washing dishes, standing on a low stool, steam fogging her glasses. I said softly, "She shouldn't be washing dishes. Her hands are blistered." Vanessa shrugged. "It's good for her. Girls should learn housework early. Don't worry, I've got it under control." Those last words, "I've got it under control," chilled me. Weeks later, I ran into Dorothy Lane, the neighbor across the street, a widowed woman in her 60s, kind and perceptive. "Mrs. Sharon, I don't know if I should say this," she lowered her voice, "but I hear yelling from your son's backyard at least twice a week." "Whose voice?" "Whose voice?" "A woman's the new wife, I think. She yells loud, and a child cries. Every time." I clenched my bag strap and kept steady. "Thank you, Dorothy. I'll keep an eye out." She nodded with sympathy. That night, I sat in my car a few houses down and watched. The kitchen window glowed yellow. Vanessa paced, pointing, hands chopping the air. Lila stood hunched by the sink. Mason and Toby lounged on the sofa with that same smile, the smile of kids who've learned to treat someone else's pain like entertainment. I opened my notebook and logged the times. 6:20 p.m., shouting. 6:45 p.m., door slams. 7 p.m., lights off, silence. Each line a mark of blame. I knew, to help Lila, I couldn't just watch. I had to shift the leverage. Until now, Vanessa and Noah believed they controlled everything. The house, the finances, the decisions. But the foundation of it all was in my hands. And if they used that foundation to grind down the child I loved most, I would pull it out. I drew up a careful plan. First, gather evidence. I hid a tiny camera in an old pendant every visit I switched it on. I photographed Lila's hands, the scatter of small injuries across her skin. I kept the ointment receipts I bought for her myself. I recorded Vanessa's sweet voice when others were around and the knife-edge tone when it was just the two of us and Lila. I told no one, not even Atticus, not yet. I needed time, needed to be sure I wasn't acting on anger alone. But the quieter Lila grew, the more I felt time running out. One evening, as I drove her home after dinner, she whispered in the car, "Grandma, if I do really well, can I call my stepmom Mom?" Such a simple question, and it shattered me. "You don't have to call anyone Mom unless they earn it, sweetheart, okay?" Lila nodded, eyes shining with tears. I realized I wasn't just fighting a cruel woman, I was fighting a small, closed system of apathy inside that house power, money, and fear knotted together. In the rear view, I watched Lila fall asleep, head tilted, hands curled around a worn teddy bear. She should have been read a bedtime story, tucked into her father's arms, not worrying about scrubbing floors fast enough to eat dinner. I tightened my grip on the wheel. If her world was warped, I would straighten it. I got home near midnight, pulled out the trust files again. The desk light glinted off the white page. If the parentage grantor confirms unethical conduct harming a minor, the agreement may be terminated immediately. I smiled to myself. "Vanessa," I whispered into the dark, "you think you control everything. You forgot one thing. This house was built by a woman, and she's about to take it all back." Outside the window, a May breeze lifted the curtain. I shut the file, more determined than ever. To save Lila, I had to become stronger than the people holding her captive, and from that moment on, I wasn't the kindly grandmother anymore. I was Sharon Whitaker about to flip a twisted family upside down. That morning I woke earlier than usual. A thin fog lay over the quiet street, dawn's pale light not yet touching their roof. In my coat pocket, the tiny camera blinked red, the silent weapon I'd charged the night before. I drove slow, parked a few houses away, turned off the engine, and sat a few extra minutes in the dark. My heart pounded not from fear, but because I knew the truth would surface this morning. I opened the gate and slid the spare key into the lock. The soft click sounded a small noise, but enough to make me feel I had crossed a new line, from a mother who stayed quiet to a woman ready to act. Inside, the house held the chill of early morning. Water ran somewhere, with a small girl's voice in between. I walked toward the kitchen. Lila stood on a tall stool, reaching up to a stack of dirty dishes nearly level with her head. Her tiny hands, swollen and red from chemicals, worked to wash each plate without dropping it. White suds pooled under the dim light. Her oversized sweater sleeves were soaked, brown hair in tangles stuck to her cheeks. I flipped the camera on, my throat tight. A 9-year-old, before school, shouldn't be starting the day with bleach and tears. The door behind me flew open. Vanessa strode in with a pink lunchbox labeled Lila. She popped the lid, glanced at the food, and suddenly dumped the whole thing into the sink, splattering it all over the child's shirt. "Did you stack the meat uneven again?" she hissed. "And what about your brothers, huh? You're always selfish." Lila jumped, dabbing at the sauce on her shirt. "I didn't mean to, I just—" "Shut up! No excuses!" From the living room, Mason leaned off the couch, smug. "Mom, told you she took my part." Toby snorted a laugh, stuffed another cookie in his mouth, eyes glued to the TV. I stood there, my whole body tensing. I'd thought I could stay calm, but seeing this with my own eyes, anger rose inside me like a burning wave. I took a deep breath and stepped out from the corner. "Enough!" My voice came out low and steady. Vanessa turned around, her smile freezing. "Mother Sharon, you're early." "Yes, I'm early," I said, walking closer, my eyes fixed on Lila's soaked hands. Just in time to see how my granddaughter starts her mornings washing dishes for you people. Noah came down the stairs, buttoning his shirt. He paused when he saw me, then pretended not to notice the tension thick in the kitchen. "Hi, Mom," he said casually, then looked at his daughter. "Lila, don't miss your bus, okay?" I cut in. "Do you not see anything wrong here, Noah?" He blinked, avoiding my eyes. "She's learning to help out, Mom. Vanessa's just teaching her responsibility." I let out a dry laugh. "Responsibility? And what about Mason and Toby? What's their responsibility?" Vanessa jumped in, forcing her voice to stay even. "They're older, they've got more schoolwork. Everyone has their own chores. I see their chores are lying on the couch watching TV and eating cookies." I met her eyes directly, her brows knit together, her lips curling in challenge. "Mother Sharon, you really shouldn't interfere with how we raise our children." I set my bag on the table and pulled out a sealed beige folder. "Then let's talk like adults, Vanessa. You said this was your and Noah's house, right?" She nodded stiffly. "Yes. We worked hard for it." I flipped open the first page and slid it toward her. "Interesting. According to the bank, this house belongs to the Whitaker Legacy Trust, of which I'm the sole trustee. Noah is listed only as a co-resident, not an owner. And you, Vanessa, you're not listed anywhere." Her face drained of color. Noah glanced at me, uneasy. "Mom, why are you bringing this up now?" "Because I'm tired, Noah," I said, my voice trembling but firm. "I've been silent for too long. I thought silence was love, but all it did was let others abuse power." The air in the kitchen froze. Vanessa forced a smile. "Are you threatening me?" "I'm not threatening," I said quietly, resting my hand on the folder. "I'm reminding you, the trust allows me to terminate all financial support immediately if any unethical conduct endangers a minor in this house. And I'm considering doing just that." Vanessa's face turned from white to red. "You can't do that." "Oh, but I can," I replied softly. "You should really read the fine print of the life you're living off." Noah stepped forward, his voice desperate. "Mom, if you do that, we'll lose the house." "Then learn to protect your daughter before you worry about your roof, Noah," I said coldly. "You're letting someone abuse your own blood." Lila stood frozen, clutching the hem of her shirt, trembling as she looked between us. I bent down, pulled a $5 bill from my wallet and said, "Here, sweetheart. Get yourself a nice lunch." Her big eyes welled with tears. Just as her tiny hand reached out, Vanessa snatched the bill from me. "She doesn't need it," she snapped. "She has her own money. I'm teaching her how to manage it." I said nothing, just tilted my head slightly, letting the tiny camera hidden in my blouse capture her face. Perfectly. A flawless recording. Lila began to cry quietly. Vanessa turned her back and muttered with disdain, "Kids are so spoiled these days." I calmly pulled out my phone, pretending to check the time while pressing the record button. "Vanessa," I said slowly, "this isn't discipline. This is abuse. Do you even understand what that means?" She scoffed, planting a hand on her hip. "Abuse? I'm raising my husband's child, in my house." I shrugged. "You're half right. You're raising someone else's child, in my house." Silence. Only the clock ticked on the wall, each second heavy, counting down to the moment of her downfall. I looked around, eyes stopping on the rubber gloves, rags, and cleaner bottles by the sink. I pulled out a few clear zip bags and carefully sealed each item, one by one, like collecting evidence from a crime scene. Vanessa watched, suspicious. "What are you doing?" "Cleaning up a little," I said with a calm smile. "Getting rid of toxic things in this house, starting with chemicals, then people." Noah frowned. "Mom, you're making this complicated." "No, son. You and she made it complicated a long time ago." I tucked the bags into my tote and took Lila's hand. "We're going to the doctor, sweetheart. I want her to check your hands." Vanessa stepped in front of me. "No, I can take care of her myself." I tilted my head slightly. My voice was calm but sharp. "I wasn't asking, Vanessa. I was informing." I led Lila to the door. Her small hand squeezed mine, her tiny fingers sliding between the wrinkles of my old palm, trembling but warm. As we crossed the threshold, I heard a dish shatter behind us. Maybe Vanessa threw it. Maybe she just couldn't stand losing control. Either way, I didn't look back. Outside, the sun was already high. I opened the car door, helped Lila into the seat, and fastened her belt. The smell of cheap detergent still lingered in her hair. "Grandma," she whispered, "are you mad at me?" I tried to do it right, but my stepmom still yelled. I squeezed her hand, my throat tight. "No, sweetheart, you did nothing wrong. From now on, you don't have to please anyone. I'll take care of it." The car rolled forward, leaving behind that spotless, hollow house a shiny mask hiding filth beneath. In the rearview mirror, I saw our reflections, one old, one young, two souls betrayed by family, now breathing in sync. I thought then some battles need no guns, only a woman brave enough to hold a recorder instead of staying silent, and I, Sharon Whitaker, had just started the fight of my life. The pediatric clinic sat on a quiet corner, about 10 minutes' drive from my home. I chose it because Dr. Helen Torres, who'd cared for Lila since she was little, still worked there. She was careful, kind, and especially sensitive to signs of emotional harm in children. When we walked in, Lila's hands were still trembling. I whispered, "It's okay, honey. It's just Dr. Helen, remember?" Lila nodded, trying to smile, but tears still rolled down her cheeks. "Doctor." Torres examined her swollen red hands, frowning slightly. "She's got a pretty severe contact dermatitis. There are small cracks too if untreated. It could get infected." She switched on a small light. "This kind of injury usually comes from strong cleaning products." "Sharon, has she been in contact with household chemicals?" I hesitated for a second, then answered firmly, "Yes, and not by accident." Helen looked up, instantly understanding the words I didn't say. She typed quickly, then turned to me. "I'll note the diagnosis clearly and recommend avoid exposure to harsh chemicals or any environment unsuitable for minors. If you'd like, I can also include suspected forced labor or neglect." I drew a deep breath. "Please do, and I'd like a copy." She nodded and printed it. While she washed her hands, I took photos of Lila's injuries, every crack, every peeled patch of skin, under the cold white light of the exam room. Each picture, each line of that report, felt like a stab to the heart, but I knew they were keys to protecting her. Before we left, Helen put a hand on my shoulder. "Sharon, you're doing the right thing." "But be ready, it won't be easy," I whispered. "I'm not looking for easy, I'm looking for right." That afternoon, I went to the office of Atticus Reed, the seasoned lawyer who had helped me set up the trust. He was in his 60s, silver-haired but sharp-eyed. When I laid the files and Lila's medical report on his desk, he studied me for a moment, then sighed. "I knew this day would come." I nodded. "You once said the Whitaker Legacy Trust has a child protection clause. I need to use it now." He flipped through his notes. "We have grounds to file for an ex parte temporary protection order for Lila. I'll ask the court to grant emergency custody to you until an investigation is complete." I looked at him steadily. "I've got evidence recordings, photos, and the doctor's statement." Atticus nodded, his voice low. "Good. The less emotion, the stronger the case. Let the law speak for us." We spent over 2 hours finalizing the paperwork. I signed page after page affidavits, custody requests, declarations. My hand trembled as I signed the last one. Atticus looked at me and said quietly, "From now on, Sharon, you're not just her grandmother, you're her legal guardian, at least temporarily. Be ready for backlash from your son and his wife." I smiled faintly. "I've been ready for a long time, Atticus." On the way home, I stopped by the County Child Protective Services office. The caseworker, Alicia Gomez, was young but serious. I handed her copies of the medical report, photos, and my first audio recording Vanessa's voice saying, "She needs to learn responsibility by doing housework." Alicia listened, her face tightening. "We'll open an investigation," she said. "But it might take a few days to verify everything." "I understand," I said, "but I need to make sure she's safe in the meantime." "The temporary order will protect her," Alicia assured me. Her tone softened. "You did the right thing coming in early. Many people don't act in time." I nodded, thanked her, and left. There was no relief in me, just a calm before the inevitable storm. I knew once Vanessa found out, she'd lose her mind. That evening, I sat at my desk, opened my laptop, and typed the notice to terminate financial support. My words were cold and precise. According to Clause 7.3 of the Whitaker Legacy Trust, any use of funds involving unethical conduct, child endangerment, or activities harmful to the welfare of a beneficiary shall be suspended immediately. Effective today. Sharon Whitaker, Trustee. I sent the email, copying both the bank and Atticus. The countdown had officially begun. Less than an hour later, my phone rang. The name flashed on the screen, Vanessa Pike. I let it ring 4 times before picking up. "You crazy old woman." "What the hell did you just do?" she screamed, voice trembling with rage. "I'm protecting my money and my granddaughter," I said calmly. "You're destroying this family." "Do you even know how much we owe?" "No, and I no longer care to." "You'll regret this, Sharon. You'll lose your son." "I lost him a long time ago," I said and pressed record. I let her rant for another minute, then hung up. Moments later, a message from Noah appeared. "Mom, I know Vanessa's hot-headed, but you're wrong. You're tearing my family apart." My hands shook slightly as I typed back, "No, Noah. I'm just done funding abuse." I set the phone down, tears falling not from weakness, but from sorrow. I mourned the son I'd raised to be kind, now so lost he couldn't tell right from wrong. That night, around 9:30, as I read Lila a bedtime story, a pounding hit the door. I opened it, and just as I expected, Noah and Vanessa stood there. Vanessa in a thin robe, hair wild, face flushed red, Noah behind her exhausted, eyes filled with both guilt and fear. "Give her back!" Vanessa shouted. "You have no right to keep her." I stayed calm. "I have a court order. You're not allowed near Lila." She laughed sharply. "What order? You think you're above us?" I turned back, opened my laptop, and hit play. The morning's recording filled the room, the sound of her throwing the lunchbox, shouting, "Scrub that floor, you useless brat!" Silence. Noah looked at his wife, then at me. "Vanessa, you—" "Shut up," she snapped. "I'll sue you, Sharon. You'll pay for this." Just then, Atticus walked in. He stood behind me, calm but commanding. "I'm Atticus Reed, attorney for Sharon Whitaker and her granddaughter, Lila Bennett. I strongly advise you both to leave immediately. The temporary protective order was approved this afternoon. Any further contact or harassment will be considered a violation of law." Vanessa opened her mouth, but Noah pulled her arm. "Let's go, Vanessa." "Not now." She yanked free, glaring at me with hatred before storming off, her heels striking the pavement like hammers. When the door shut, I leaned back against the wall, exhaling slowly. Atticus nodded. "They'll be back, but at least tonight, you and the girl are safe." I smiled faintly, my voice hoarse. "Thank you, Atticus. I just needed one peaceful night for her to sleep." After he left, I turned off the lights, leaving only a small lamp glowing by the bed. Lila lay curled up under the blanket, her hands gently bandaged, her breathing soft and steady. I sat beside her, brushed her hair, and the faint scent of baby shampoo filled the air. "Grandma," she murmured, half asleep, "tomorrow. Do I have—" To wake up early to clean again? My throat tightened. I whispered, "No, sweetheart. From now on, all you have to do is be a child." Outside, the night wind rustled the trees, whispering like a quiet promise. I knew this battle was only beginning, but tonight at least, I had conquered fear and won back a little peace for her. 3 days after the protective order was issued, things seemed calm. But I knew it was only the silence before another storm. Vanessa wasn't the type to lose quietly. That morning, while I was cleaning the kitchen, Mrs. Dorothy Lane Noah's neighbor came over. Her face was tense but resolute. She was the one who'd first told me about the screaming from their backyard. I opened the door, and she held out a small silver USB, her hand trembling. "Mrs. Sharon, I think you need to see this." I frowned. "What is it, Dorothy?" "My porch camera. I didn't mean to spy, but I caught a few things. I saw Lila outside, using a hose to wash clothes. I got worried, so I saved some clips." I took it, a strange heaviness rising inside me. Not satisfaction, pain. Because what I'd feared was now confirmed. Dorothy sat down and poured herself some tea. "There's one clip. From Friday 2 weeks ago. The girl's standing on a tiny plastic stool, trying to hang wet clothes. The stool nearly tips over. Then a woman's voice yells from inside, 'If you're not done by 5, no dinner for you.' Sometimes one sentence from an adult can mark a child for life. What do you think of Vanessa's way of teaching discipline? Feel free to share your thoughts below." I closed my eyes, gripping the teacup tightly. Just imagining that scene made my heart crack. "Dorothy, may I have a copy of that video?" "Of course. I made 2 copies, one for you, one for me. I don't want to be too involved, but I'll testify if needed." I looked at her, moved. "Thank you, Dorothy. It's people like you who make justice possible." She smiled gently. "I'm just doing what any mother would." That afternoon, I took the USB to Atticus's office. He was reviewing the case files when I arrived. I said nothing, just placed it on his desk. "Security footage from the neighbor," I said quietly. "Vanessa's voice is on it." He plugged it in, playing the clips. The screen showed Lila dragging a hose twice her height, hanging dripping clothes. The plastic stool wobbled. Then came that cold, unmistakable voice. "If you're not done by 5, no dinner for you." Atticus looked up, eyes no longer cold but warm with conviction. "Sharon, this is the turning point. With audio and visual proof like this, CPS can't ignore it." I nodded slowly. "I don't want revenge. I just want them to stop hurting her." "And you're doing it the right way," he said. He copied the footage into the court file. "I'll submit this at the next hearing and send a copy to CPS. They'll need to re-interview Lila." 2 days later, CPS came again. This time it was Alicia Gomez, the same young worker I'd met before. The interview took place in my living room, warm, quiet, safe. I served tea, then sat beside Lila in silence. Alicia turned on her recorder and spoke gently. "Lila, I just want you to tell me what you remember. There's no right or wrong answer, okay?" Lila sat with her hands twisting her shirt. "If I say something wrong, my stepmom will yell. She says I lie." "No one will yell here," Alicia said softly. I stayed beside her, holding her hand lightly, saying nothing. That was the rule: guardians couldn't lead testimony. "What scares you the most at home?" Alicia asked. "I'm scared. Of yelling. When I hear her slippers on the floor, my heart beats fast. If I spill water," she says. "I can't have dinner. Sometimes I do everything right. And she still yells." Her little voice shook, her shoulders trembling. I squeezed her hand gently, holding back my tears. Alicia stopped the recording and nodded. "Thank you, Lila. You're very brave. You know your grandma loves you very much, right?" Lila smiled faintly, looking at me. "I know. She told me all I have to do is be a child. I didn't say anything else." I just smoothed her hair, my heart aching and easing at the same time. The next afternoon, Noah came by. He looked worn out, dark circles under his eyes. When I opened the door, he walked in without a word and sank into a chair like a man who'd lost his bearings. "Mom," he began. "I watched the videos. I didn't know it was that bad." I looked at him, waiting. "But Vanessa, she didn't mean to, Mom. She just wants the girl to learn discipline. You know she's not a bad person." I sighed. "Discipline is teaching with love, Noah, not fear. Didn't you see Lila's eyes? That's the look of a child who no longer believes she deserves to be loved." He lowered his head, fingers locked together. "I just want peace. I don't want a divorce. I don't want to fight anyone." "And because you're afraid to fight," I said softly, "you let someone else win with cruelty." Right then, Atticus called on video. I put him on speaker. "Noah," he said bluntly, "you need to understand this. Under Ohio law, psychological abuse and forcing a minor to do labor can lead to restrictions on custody. If you keep enabling or covering for it, the court will treat you as complicit." Noah looked up, eyes sunken. I need time." "I'm afraid the court won't give you much," Atticus replied, and hung up. Silence stretched. Finally, Noah stood. "I'll talk to Vanessa, but I hope you won't make this worse, Mom." I watched him walk to the door, feeling both love and disappointment. A grown man who still didn't know what responsibility meant. 2 days later, I learned Vanessa had made her move. On social media, an anonymous account hers posted a long rant with my photo. Some parents never let go, obsessed with controlling everything. "I love my stepdaughter, but my mother-in-law is trying to rip her from her father, making up stories to break our family." Hundreds of comments poured in, split down the middle. Some believed her, some didn't. Then she doubled down, calling me a controlling grandma and a liar trying to steal custody. I read every line, didn't respond. I screenshotted everything and saved it in a folder labeled Evidence, Defamation. Same with the threatening messages. I didn't block them, I archived them. One evening, Atticus called. "I've seen all her posts. Sharon, do you want me to send takedown requests?" "Not yet," I said. "Sometimes you let the mask fall on its own by letting people talk." He chuckled softly. "So you're waiting for the right moment. I used to teach my students that in art, silence at the right time is stronger than a drum. Same in this fight. When I speak, I want all the evidence ready." Atticus was quiet for a few seconds, then said, "If they keep twisting the story, we can hold a small press briefing. Release the videos, audio, and the medical report. Let the public be the first court." "I know," I answered. "But not today. I want them to dig their own hole a bit deeper." I looked out the window, dusk settling over the neighborhood, light pooling on the trees. Inside, Lila giggled at the table, drawing a picture. A grandmother and a little girl holding hands under a blue sky with the scrawled word, "Home." I smiled. No matter how loud the world got, as long as that laughter existed, I knew I was on the right path, and I knew Vanessa's perfect mask was cracking piece by piece. She could lie to the world, but she couldn't outrun the light of the truth. I just needed to wait, and when the time came, I would be the one to pull the curtain down with my own hands. After weeks of gathering evidence, what I needed now wasn't anger, it was control. I understood this clearly. To protect Lila long-term, I had to pull every lever of power in this family to my side. On a quiet morning, I sat in my study and reopened the original charter of the Whitaker Legacy Trust, which I'd created more than 20 years ago. I remembered drafting it with my husband, a former attorney, with the hope of shielding our descendants from life's risks. Now it stood as the one legal shield between Lila and the people who were supposed to love her. The third objective in the charter stated, "The Whitaker Legacy Trust may suspend funding for any family member if the use of funds harms the welfare or rights of minors within the Whitaker lineage." I read each word slowly, like reciting an old vow. I wasn't trying to punish my son, I was forcing him to face the cost of his silence. I drafted a formal letter to the trust bank and the investment custodian. In it, I stated, suspend all financial disbursements to Noah Whitaker's household, including homeowners insurance, supplemental education grants, and authorized user credit cards. Keep all expenses earmarked for Lila Bennett. Medical care, education, therapy. Require the bank to notify the recipients directly about the suspension, citing the Protection of Minors Welfare Clause. I signed my name clearly and sent it. With a few clicks, the financial door for Noah and Vanessa shut completely. News traveled faster than I expected. In less than 2 days, Noah called in a panic. "Mom, my card's locked, the account's frozen, the boys' tuition, the electric bill, everything's due. What did you do?" I answered evenly. "What I warned you I'd do, Noah. No one gets to use trust money to maintain a toxic environment for a child." But Vanessa's furious. She says you're humiliating us on purpose. I paused, then said, she should focus on changing herself instead of yelling. I'm only protecting my granddaughter. When I hung up, part of me ached, but my rational side knew this was the step he needed to face reality. 3 days later, Vanessa called me herself, this time dripping with sarcasm. "Feeling good now, Sharon? My house is drowning in bills and your precious son is crying because his cards are cut. You think you can control this family?" Calmly, I replied, "No, I don't control anyone. I'm just pulling my support out of a place where love's been turned into a weapon. If you want a way forward, I have one." "What way?" she snapped. "Family therapy. You, Noah, and Lila, with a licensed professional. Then sign a commitment to end all abusive behavior, including verbal. If you comply, I'll consider restoring support." She let out a bitter laugh. "I don't need your money. I'll countersue for defamation, for kidnapping my husband's child." I exhaled, my voice low. "See you in court, Vanessa. I trust justice to stand with the child." The next day, Atticus called with an update. "The court just approved temporary supervised arrangements. Lila stays with you until the investigation ends. Noah can visit, but only with a social worker present. Vanessa is barred from contact." I nodded, a weight lifting. "Thank you, Atticus." "Finally, clear boundaries," he said. "I've done this for 30 years, Sharon, and it's rare to see a grandmother as brave as you. Most fear conflict, fear losing their sons. You chose to risk everything to save a child." I gave a small, weary smile. "Some losses are necessary, Atticus. Otherwise, the next generation pays double." The first visit between Noah and Lila took place in a CPS observation room. One-way glass, a couch, a few wooden toys, and a camera in the corner. I sat in the back with the supervisor. When Noah walked in, Lila froze. She gripped her sleeve, shoulders shaking. "Hi, honey," Noah said, trying to smile. "Daddy, I missed you." Lila gave a tiny nod, keeping her distance, eyes down. My chest tightened. I wanted to step in, to hold them both, but I knew this was a necessary test. Noah tried to make small talk, shared bits about home. He brought an old stuffed bear. "You like this one? I saved it for you." Lila took it, but stayed quiet. The social worker asked gently, "Do you want to say anything to your dad, Lila?" She whispered, "Dad, please don't let Mom Vanessa yell anymore, okay?" The room went still. Noah bowed his head, his hands clenched white. I saw a tear hit the floor. "I'm sorry," he said hoarsely. "I was wrong. I'll try." Watching them, I felt anger and mercy wrestle in me. Angry that it was so late, grateful he could still bow his head. The visit ended after 45 minutes. As Lila left, she glanced back at her father, no longer purely afraid, but unsure. A small sign, but enough for me to know, healing had begun. On the way home, I opened Dr. Helen's psychological progress checklist for guardians. 1. Frequency of nightmares. 2. Reaction when the abuser is mentioned. 3. Response to loud sounds. 4. Ability to trust family members. 5. Interest in learning and play. I started marking each line. Week 1, Lila still woke up at night, afraid of running water. Week 2, she slept through 3 nights in a row. Week 3, she giggled at children's songs. Tiny changes, but to me, they were worth more than any courtroom win. I sent the updates to Helen and asked to schedule weekly individual therapy for Lila. She agreed at once. She needs to learn how to feel safe again, Helen said. I also recommend a parent training track for Noah if he's willing. I smiled faintly. I'll talk to him. I don't expect miracles, but at least I want him to understand what real atonement is. That evening, while I was straightening up, the phone rang. Noah. Mom. I talked to Vanessa. She still won't admit anything. She wants to sue. I'm exhausted. So what are you going to do? I want to start therapy, Mom. Not for the court because I don't want to lose my daughter forever. I closed my eyes for a moment. For the first time in years, he called me Mom without distance. Good, I said, my voice unsteady. Go see Dr. Helen. She'll help you start over. After I hung up, I looked out at the porch. Lila sat on the steps, hugging her old bear, smiling at the neighbor's cat. The late sun poured over her hair, a soft honey gold. I knew the road was long, but the balance had shifted, money, power, and the law no longer in the abuser's hands. I'd pulled every lever quietly, legally, without a single scream. And in that moment I understood, justice isn't about defeating someone, it's about giving peace back to the weaker one. I knew this day would come, the day Vanessa reached for the only weapon she truly mastered: fabrication and manipulation of public opinion. One weekday morning, I turned on the TV out of habit and saw my name on a local Columbus news segment. The anchor read in a flat tone, "According to a close source, an elderly woman is trying to separate her granddaughter from her father due to family conflicts. The stepmother claims the child is being brainwashed by the grandmother and is faking abuse." The image on screen was an old photo of me and Lila at a picnic last year, sloppily edited, but convincing enough for casual viewers to think I was seizing custody. I switched off the TV and took a deep breath. Lila looked up from her drawing. "Grandma, what are they saying?" "It's okay, sweetheart," I said softly. "They just don't know the truth yet." In less than a day, social media blew up. An account called @RealVanessaMomLife posted a long message with a screenshot of the trust's suspension notice. She wrote, "I used to believe in kindness, but sometimes family can be the cruelest. I'm fighting to get back my stepdaughter, who was taken by her grandmother out of greed and spite." Hundreds of comments rushed in. "Some kids are just impossible to raise. Typical grandma who can't share love. Feel bad for the stepmom, probably framed." I read every line, my heart aching not from shame, but because the world is too quick to believe a polished story. That night, Atticus called, his voice rough with anger. "Sharon, have you seen it? They're slicing up the story. I recommend we hit back, release the evidence, unedited, no spin. Let the truth speak." I paused, then asked, "Do you think the press will listen?" "They will," he said firmly. "If you speak with facts, they can't ignore you." 2 days later, Atticus and I held a small press briefing at his office. No stage lights, just a bright room, a long table, and a few local reporters and regional TV crews. In front of them, Atticus laid out the evidence: photos of Lila's injuries, Dr. Helen's diagnosis, CPS reports, and the neighbor's security footage. When everyone settled, I stood. At 70, my voice was still steady enough to fill that quiet room. "I didn't call this to get revenge," I said, looking straight into the cameras. I'm not kidnapping anyone's child. I simply stopped fueling cruelty. No one spoke. Atticus signaled the tech to start the screen. The first clip rolled. Dorothy Lane's porch camera. Tiny Lila on a wobbly plastic stool, lifting a long hose to hang wet clothes. Vanessa's voice rang out clear as day. "If you're not done by 5 o'clock, no dinner for you." The murmurs died away. Only the projector hummed and people breathed. Next came the kitchen audio, Vanessa's contempt, Lila's choked apologies. Each sound cut the room like a blade. When the screen went dark, silence fell. A female reporter set down her pen and looked up at me, visibly moved. I spoke slowly, one word at a time. "No one is perfect, not even my son, but when adult silence makes a child afraid in her own home, silence stops being love, it becomes complicity." Unexpectedly, Noah stood from the back row. Shirt wrinkled, face tired. Without being asked, he stepped up beside me. "Mom, may I speak?" I nodded. He turned to the press, voice shaky but clear. "I'm Noah Whitaker, Lila's father. I knew about some of this before, but I stayed silent. I told myself it was discipline. The truth is, I let my daughter live in fear. I'm sorry to her, and I'm sorry to my mother for failing as a father." The room was still. A young reporter tightened his grip on the mic and asked quietly, "Are you confirming these materials are authentic, Mr. Whitaker?" Noah nodded. "Yes. I've seen everything. And I'll cooperate with CPS to make sure my child is safe." That answer sealed it. I saw heads drop to scribble notes, and others look at me differently, not with doubt, but with respect. Atticus ended the briefing with a firm statement. "This is not a case about vengeance. It's a child protection effort. We're ready to cooperate with every agency for an open, transparent investigation." By that afternoon, public opinion began to shift. Local outlets ran new headlines. Clip shows stepmother berating young child alleged abuse in Whitaker family. The hashtag number, Justice for Lila, appeared quickly. Many who had criticized me earlier returned to apologize under old posts. More importantly, CPS received additional reports from other neighbors of Noah's accounts of shouting, things breaking, and Lila doing chores in the cold. They immediately reopened the case and moved to verify everything. As for Vanessa, like a cornered animal, she started to lose control. That night, she went live on social media, face flushed, voice cracking with rage. "They staged all of it. She wants to destroy me. I'm a good mother. I'm raising her the right way." That's my right. But as she kept cursing out CPS and the press, the comments filled with backlash. "With that attitude, you call yourself a good mother? You should stop before her lawyer submits more evidence. Careful, you're going to get your account banned." Within 24 hours, the platform warned her account for hate speech. Some videos were removed for bullying and incitement to violence. I didn't feel triumphant, just sad. She could lie and perform, but she couldn't hide who she really was when a camera stared straight at her. 2 days later, Atticus called, calm but clearly relieved. "The court just moved up the custody hearing. They want to handle this quickly before it escalates." I let out a long breath. "Finally," he laughed. "What you did at the press briefing made a real difference. Public opinion isn't her weapon anymore, Sharon. Now justice will take over." I looked out the window. Late sun fell over the garden, where Lila played with the white cat I'd just adopted for her. Her clear laughter carried on the breeze. I remembered what I'd said at the briefing. I'm not seeking revenge. I'm just stopping the fuel supply to cruelty. And it hit me. In this noisy world, truth doesn't have to shout sometimes. It just has to stand still long enough for people to hear it. The legal fight wasn't over, but the scale had tipped. Not to my side, to the side of a child relearning how to smile without fear. And for me, that was the first victory. The hearing day came with a light rain, thin, cold, and persistent, like the exhaustion of the past months. I held Lila's hand as we entered the courthouse, her small palm steadier than before. She wore a pale blue dress I had ironed the night before, hair tied neatly back. Each step she took affirmed what I'd fought for: a child's peace. The courtroom was small and warm, polished wooden benches shining. Atticus sat beside me, flipping through files marked B with yellow tabs. Across from us was Vanessa, heavy makeup, eyes blazing. Noah sat between, shoulders slumped, guilt on his face. When Judge Rebecca Collins entered, everyone stood. She looked to be in her 50s, stern but not cold, eyes sharp as she scanned the room. The hearing began with expert testimony. Child psychologist Dr. Helen Torres went first. White coat, clear voice, no theatrics, just wait. "I've followed Lila Bennett for 6 weeks," she said. "Based on therapy sessions, behavioral assessments, and clinical observation, I find signs of moderate to high anxiety, especially tied to yelling and activities involving cleaning, water, and chemical smells. Symptoms include insomnia, fear of making mistakes, and a flinch response when adults raise their voices." She held up her report and pointed to a chart. "These reactions indicate a controlling environment with prolonged verbal punishment, which can develop into an anxiety disorder without intervention." Vanessa snorted under her breath, but the judge tapped the gavel lightly. "Maintain order." Next was the dermatologist from Columbus Medical, who examined Lila the first week I brought her in. His voice was rough but firm. "The injuries on Lila's hands are from repeated mechanical and chemical exposure. They cannot result from a single incident. Test results point to high alkaline cleaners commonly used for floors and dishes. Callus tissue in the early stage indicates regular exposure over time." Atticus stood. "Doctor, can you say with confidence this is not an allergy or one-off accident?" "Absolutely. The mirrored pattern on both hands and the cracking at the finger joints show frequent soaking in a cleaning solution. That's not random behavior." Across the aisle, Vanessa's patience snapped. She jumped up. "Lies! I never made her do anything. Who can prove those clips weren't edited?" The judge glanced at Atticus. He smiled like he'd been waiting for that. "Your Honor," he said, "we submit file metadata, the original ring security footage from Mrs. Dorothy Lane's system, with timestamps, date, GPS coordinates, and authentication hash. All details match the recorded moments." He handed over the security firm's certification. "No edits, no splices, no re-encoding, original evidence." Vanessa stepped back, still muttering, but her eyes flickered. Then Mrs. Dorothy Lane took the stand. She moved slowly but steady. After swearing in, she looked at me and gave a small nod. "I've lived next to the Whitakers for over 10 years, she began. "This past year, I heard yelling from the backyard at least 3 times a week. I saw little Lila pulling a hose, hanging laundry when it was still cold. I was worried but didn't step in. Then one day I saw her on a plastic stool, stretching to hang clothes. The stool shook hard, she almost fell. I called out, and she just gave me a little smile." Her voice caught. "When I heard someone reported it, I knew I had to speak. No child should go through that." The room went quiet. The judge nodded, thanked her. I saw Dorothy's eyes glisten. "Without her, I wouldn't have today's proof." Then, Noah. He stood with his hands knotted together, voice small but clear. "I'm Lila's father. I admit I've been negligent and cowardly. I knew my wife was strict, but I told myself it was parenting. I was wrong. After seeing the videos, I realized I let my daughter live in fear in her own home. I accept responsibility, and I'll attend the therapy and parenting classes Dr. Torres recommended." The judge studied him, then nodded. "You seem to understand what must change. Prove it with actions, not words." I exhaled softly. For the first time in months, I heard Noah's voice without anger in my chest, only grief. My turn. Atticus handed me our safety plan for Lila. I rose, slow but steady. "Your Honor, I don't want to strip Noah of fatherhood." I'm asking that Lila live with me full-time until clinicians confirm her mental health is stable. Noah may have supervised visits up to twice a week. Regarding Vanessa Pike, I ask for a no-contact order, no direct contact, including calls or social media until the investigation concludes. I looked at the bench. I'm not chasing a win. I just want my granddaughter to fall asleep without fearing footsteps in the hallway. Silence. Judge Collins nodded, voice measured but firm. Based on the evidence, witness testimony, and expert reports, the court grants expanded temporary protections. Lila Bennett will reside with Mrs. Sharon Whitaker. The biological father is granted supervised visitation. Respondent Vanessa Pike is barred from contact and must complete anger management treatment within 6 months before any custody review. The gavel struck one short rap, but to me it sounded like the end of a nightmare. Outside the courtroom, Vanessa shrieked, voice ragged, "You're all in on it! She bought everyone! I'll sue! You'll all pay!" 2 security officers approached, firm but polite, and escorted her out. Her heels hammered the stone floor, fading into the rain. Noah stood still, tears falling. He turned to me, voice hoarse. "Mom, I'm sorry." I put a hand on his shoulder, said nothing. Some sins can't be fixed by an apology, only time and action. As we left the courthouse, I knelt to retie Lila's shoe. She gripped my hand and whispered, "Grandma, do I have to go back and scrub floors?" I smiled, my throat tight. "Never again, sweetheart, never." She hugged me hard, warm tears on my shoulder. I looked up at the sky as the rain let up. A thin sun breaking through gray clouds like a promise that after every just verdict, there's a dawn of truth. The next day, the media ran the story everywhere. Headlines read, "Columbus Court Grants Protective Custody to Grandmother After Stepmother's Abuse Child Placed with a Van. Grandma Temporarily." Public opinion swung to Lila. People who had criticized me posted apologies. Some mothers shared their own stories, saying they saw their children in Lila kids who need to be believed, not forced to be perfect. I read them with a full heart, not because I needed support, but because the child's voice was finally being heard. And in that quiet afternoon, while Lila added another smile to her family drawing, I knew this fight isn't truly over, but the line between love and abuse has been drawn for good. And I, Sharon Whitaker, will guard that line until my granddaughter is strong enough to walk past it on her own, without fear. Time after the hearing passed like gentle early autumn wind, slow, clean, hopeful. After months of fear, Lila's life finally began to come back, not by magic, but by small days, steady steps, and a lot of love. Every morning I took Lila to see Dr. Helen Torres, now a fixture in our healing. The schedule was clear: Mondays for Lila's individual therapy, where she drew, talked, and learned to name her feelings. Wednesdays for Noah's parent sessions to relearn fatherhood, and Fridays, when safe, supervised family therapy, 3 generations sitting together. At first, Lila was shy, speaking in short sentences. Gradually, she learned to share without fear of being scolded. One day, Helen asked, "Lila, what do you do when you're sad?" She was quiet, then whispered, "I used to scrub floors so my stepmom wouldn't be mad. Now I draw or I hug Grandma." Helen smiled. I looked over and saw Lila's eyes light up, like she'd found a missing piece of herself. Her hands healed after a month of ointment. The cracks disappeared, leaving faint pink traces of the past. But what thrilled me wasn't just her healthy hands, it was the smile that kept returning. Now, each evening, instead of curling up in a corner, Lila sat at her desk and colored bright scenes, fields, sunflowers, little houses with smoke rising from chimneys. "Grandma," she asked once, "why is cooking fun for people?" I laughed softly. "Because they're doing what they want, not what they're forced to do." I handed her a tiny apron. "I'll teach you to cook only if you want to." From then on, the kitchen became our healing room. I taught her to knead dough, slice fruit, stir a warm pot of soup. Flour on her cheeks made her burst into giggles. I felt like I'd stepped back into the calm years of raising Noah, years I thought were gone forever. At the same time, I created the Lila's Light Scholarship, a small carve-out from the Whitaker Legacy Trust for Lila and any children in our family who wanted art or music lessons. I wrote to Atticus, "A child can forget fear when they get to touch beauty. Let music and color do their work, heal instead of punish." He replied the next day, brief and moved. I've never seen a grandmother draft legal language with this much heart. I couldn't rewrite the past, but I could lay a brighter path so Lila's future wouldn't be shadowed again. Noah, the son who had crumpled into silence, started from scratch. Helen gave him the 3 things a day assignment. 1. Praise your child at least once, even for something small. 2. Spend at least 10 minutes playing without controlling. 3. Listen without interrupting, no matter how trivial it seems. He was awkward at first. He said the first day he only managed, "Did you like your dinner?" But he found a rhythm. One evening he called, voice soft and full, "Mom, Lila and I planted a tree today. She said if it grows fast, it means I learned how to care." I smiled, eyes stinging. "Let the tree prove it, Noah." I also coached him on setting boundaries with a toxic partner. During one talk, I was blunt. "Noah, love doesn't mean endurance. You can care about someone, but you can't let them hurt you or your child. Boundaries don't split love, they protect." He sat a long time, then nodded. "I get it, Mom. I won't let anyone call Lila useless again. Ever." What surprised me were Vanessa's boys, Mason and Toby. After the story spread, their school offered counseling to both. Helen suggested, if possible, group therapy, kids learning empathy and labeling feelings. I thought hard, then agreed only with consent from their current guardian and in a strictly safe setting. One afternoon, I watched through the glass as Mason and Toby sat beside Lila, working on a shared drawing. No one spoke, but all 3 had gentle eyes, no rivalry, no fear. I knew abuse doesn't just hurt the direct victim, it warps the children who witness it. If I could help more than one, I would. As Lila healed, I prepared the petition for permanent custody. Atticus warned Vanessa could appeal anytime we couldn't relax. I compiled every CPS update, medical file, therapy notes, and Lila's school reports. Each week I sent progress summaries, transparent, detailed, nothing omitted. I stayed in close touch with school. Lila's homeroom teacher, Miss Davis, called every Friday with updates. Lila joined the music club. She's got real talent at the keyboard, Mrs. Whitaker. Each time, warmth filled me. I'd answer simply, "Thank you." My granddaughter finally gets to be a child. One evening, Lila burst into the kitchen, beaming. "Grandma, my teacher praised me today. She said I kept the rhythm." I turned, grinning. "That's wonderful. See? When you dare to sing, the world listens." She hugged me, voice bright. "I want to be a singer. But if I can't, I'll teach kids who are sad like I was." I paused, then smiled and smoothed her hair. "Whatever you choose, keep that kindness." Sometimes Noah stopped by with a new sapling. The 3 of them watered and chatted softly. I watched from the porch and stayed out of it. They needed to rebuild their bond with patience. Helen once said, "Therapy has no magic, only the repetition of love done right." I believe that. Now my home isn't a temporary shelter. It's a true nest where hurt children relearn trust in adults, in themselves, and in tomorrows without yelling. At dusk one day, I sat on the back porch and watched Lila on the swing, hair flying, laughter ringing up toward the sky. I remembered Atticus's line, "Justice isn't only in the verdict, it's in how we nurture what follows." Now I understand completely. At 70, I'm relearning how to nurture too. Peace built with right discipline, clear boundaries, and love without conditions. That fragile seed of peace, after everything, sprouted from the wounds themselves. And I believe if we keep tending it, It will grow into a garden of freedom, where no one ever has to fear the sound of footsteps in the hallway again. Peace is always the most fragile thing after a storm, and I had already guessed that, with someone like Vanessa, silence never lasts. One morning in mid-February, while I was making breakfast, my phone wouldn't stop buzzing. 17 messages, all from unknown numbers, but the tone was unmistakable. "You think you've won? Don't forget I'm still the mother of 2 boys, and they won't spare that weak little girl. Everyone will know you're the one who destroys other people's families. Time for me to take back what's mine." Short, icy lines. I took screenshots and sent them straight to Atticus. Less than an hour later, he called back. "Vanessa just violated the no-contact order. That's a direct threat. I'll file a supplement with the court." I sighed and sat down. Part of me wanted to rage, but the rest was just tired. Maybe for someone like her, resentment is the only fuel left. A few days later, social media flared up again. Mason's account posted a vague status. "Some people should stop pretending to be heroes. Things aren't what they say." Below it, Toby added a mocking emoji. Some of their friends reposted, tagged Lila, and left cruel comments. When I saw Lila sitting silent at her desk, eyes shrinking from the screen, I knew what was happening. I shut the laptop and pulled up a chair beside her. "Sweetheart, what they say doesn't matter. What matters is you know the truth. No one gets to make you feel wrong for being loved." Lila nodded, tears brimming. I held her close and heard her heart racing like a frightened little bird. Atticus moved quickly. He filed another motion citing harassment and the use of minors in an adult conflict. "If she thinks she can weaponize those boys," he said, "she picked the wrong battlefield." Vanessa didn't stop, she switched tactics. One afternoon, when I went to pick up Lila from school as usual, 2 police officers stopped me at the gate. "Mrs. Sharon Whitaker?" "Yes, that's me. A woman named Vanessa Pike just reported that you kidnapped a child at Columbus Elementary." I gave a small laugh, opened my bag, and handed over a certified copy of the temporary order with the bold red seal. "This is a lawful guardianship order. I'm authorized to pick up my granddaughter. Miss Pike may not have read the no-contact order carefully." They reviewed the papers and exchanged a look. One turned to me and said quietly, "Everything's in order, ma'am. Sorry for the inconvenience. We'll note a warning for the false report." I nodded and thanked them. Lila stood beside me, gripping my hand. She whispered, "Grandma, is my stepmom mad again?" I smoothed her hair. "She can be mad. Just don't be afraid." But the peak came on a weekend afternoon. Early spring, the neighborhood park crowded, kids laughing everywhere. I took Lila to the playground after her music lesson. While I was chatting with another parent, Vanessa appeared out of nowhere, striding toward Lila. Hair in a high bun, sunglasses on, but I knew that walk instantly. "Lila," she called. Sweetly, too sweet. "Mommy misses you, honey. Come to Mommy." Lila panicked and backed behind the slide. I shot up, rushed over, and stood between them. "You're violating a court order, Vanessa. Leave now." "My child and you dare keep me from her?" she hissed through her teeth. Luckily, the neighborhood security team already knew about the order. They came over immediately and asked for her ID. Vanessa flailed and shouted that I had stolen her child, drawing everyone's eyes. Lila sobbed and clung to me. Another guard called the police. When they arrived, Vanessa was still yelling, voice ragged. The officers kept their distance, read the no-contact order, and told her to leave the area immediately. One turned to me, reassuring, "Mrs. Whitaker, we'll file a report. If you'd like, you can request enhanced enforcement." I just nodded. I didn't want to prolong this scene in front of Lila. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat by the window looking out at the backyard where Lila had hung up her drawings again. Moonlight fell over the small planters, quiet and fragile. I wondered whether to speak out publicly one more time to expose all of Vanessa's new antics or let the law do its job. In the end, I chose silence. I understood that what Lila needed wasn't a grandmother who never stopped fighting, it was a grandmother who made life normal again. The next morning I still drove her to school, still stopped for her favorite donuts, still kissed her forehead at the classroom door. Ordinary, but inside that ordinary was a quiet win. Noah, meanwhile, began to crumble under the weight of it all. He came by that evening, gaunt and hollow-eyed. "Mom, I don't know what to do anymore. Vanessa's out of control. She texts all night, threatens to kill herself, then says she'll sue you and sue the court." I set down my teacup and looked him in the eye. "You can't stay in the middle forever, Noah. It's time to choose right or wrong. There's no gray when a child is being hurt." He was silent a long time. I could see the conflict in him, guilt, fear, and a flicker of hope. Finally, he pulled a packet from his pocket and set it in front of me. "This is my sworn statement supporting your custody, drafted by Atticus." I signed it. I held his gaze, tears rising though I kept steady. "Are you sure?" "I've never been more sure." "I was wrong, Mom. Now I want to do what's right." I nodded and took his hand. "Then you've taken the first step toward being a real father." The next morning, Atticus called with news. "Vanessa's been detained for a second violation of the no-contact order, this time with added harassment and public disturbance. The court's considering misdemeanor charges enough to remove any shot at custody." I went quiet for a few seconds, not from joy, but a dull sadness. She had pushed herself to the edge. No one can save a person who believes winning is making others hurt. 3 days later, Atticus sent an official notice. The Columbus court has set the hearing for permanent custody of Lila Bennett for next month. "Sharon, we're almost there." I held the paper and stared at the bold line. Everything I'd walked through, tears, threats, evidence, justice, now gathered into a single date. I folded it and looked up at Lila practicing the piano in the living room. The music rang out simple, alive. I knew that whatever the verdict said, her heart already belonged to peace. And that, to me, was the final sentence for cruelty, not prison, but being forgotten by a life it no longer controls. On the morning of the ruling, Columbus skies were a rare, clear blue. Sunlight slipped through the courthouse windows, glowing on the polished floor like a message. Today belongs to truth. I sat beside Atticus, clutching a small wallet with an old photo of Lila laughing in her mother's arms. Every time I looked at it, I remembered why I came this far. Not to win, but to let a child be happy again. Across the aisle, Vanessa sat with her head down, face drawn, more hollow than before. No smile, no defiance. Next to her, a young attorney looked uneasy, his file thin to the point of pity. After so many violations and harassment reports, they had little left to grab onto. Judge Rebecca Collins entered, black robe flowing, gaze sharp but not unkind. She tapped the gavel to begin. The other side presented first, but their arguments were weak. Vanessa's lawyer tried, "My client is a misunderstood stepmother, acting out of love." But Atticus rose calmly, precise. Emotion is never a defense for threats, harassment, or using children in adult conflict. The judge nodded. Sustained. Silence swept the room. Then Atticus opened his leather case, set down a thick file and a familiar silver USB. "Your Honor," he said, "we submit a full timeline." He projected the screen, photos of Lila's hand injuries, Dr. Torres's signed medical diagnosis, footage from Dorothy Lane's camera showing the child on a wobbling stool hanging laundry, and Vanessa's chilling voice, "No dinner if it's not done by 5 p.m. The room didn't breathe. A few reporters in back scribbled notes. No one spoke. Next slide. Screenshots of threats, social posts recruiting minors, police confirmations of 2 order violations. He closed with one clean sentence. "This is no longer a family spat. It's a repeated, deliberate pattern of abuse that only stopped when the law intervened." The judge noted something. I saw Vanessa's fingers dig into the table's edge until her knuckles went white. For personal statements, Noah stood. White shirt, no tie, hair neat. His eyes were different, no dodging, no fear. His voice shook at first, then steadied. I'm Noah Whitaker, Lila's father. I admit I was negligent. I let my daughter be hurt in a place that should have been safe. I don't blame anyone, not even Vanessa. I just know I failed to protect her. He drew a breath and faced the judge. I've been in therapy and parenting classes for 7 weeks. I understand being a father isn't just providing, it's showing up. I'm not asking for privileges. I'm asking for a plan so I can earn my daughter's trust back, step by step. My throat tightened. In the separate child-friendly room, Lila watched on a screen. I saw her eyes shine wet, but no longer afraid. When it was my turn, Atticus gave a small nod. I stood, still holding the photo. Your Honor, I don't want to remove Noah from Lila's life. I want to protect her first, and when Noah is ready, support him in being her father again. I turned to my son, voice softening. My son's mistake was silence. Admitting it today tells me there's still a father in him. Please help him keep that good part. The judge's expression seemed to ease. After a brief recess, she delivered the ruling. The court grants legal guardianship of Lila Bennett to Mrs. Sharon Whitaker. Mr. Noah Whitaker is granted supervised visitation for the first 6 months, with the option to petition for reduced supervision upon positive clinical progress. Respondent Vanessa Pike is barred from contact long-term and must complete a 12-month anger management program. Regarding assets, the court recognizes the Whitaker Legacy Trust's management authority. Mr. Noah Whitaker will lose residence privileges and financial support if he again enables abusive behavior or violates rehabilitation conditions. Her voice was even, but to me each word felt like a cool wind clearing months of gloom. She paused, then added, The court notes Mr. Whitaker's cooperation and improvement. This is not an ending, it's a roadmap for a new start. 2 crisp taps of the gavel. A chapter closed. Vanessa shot up to speak, but her attorney held her shoulder and shook his head. Officers escorted her out to process short-term detention. On the lesser charges, harassment, and 2 order violations. She glanced back, eyes not angry, now empty. I just watched. I'd promised myself the only revenge I wanted was seeing cruelty burn itself out. In the days after, the public conversation softened. Headlines shifted from scandal to something warmer. From conflict to healing, a grandmother's fight to protect her granddaughter's childhood. People wrote me letters saying they believed again that law and compassion can travel together. I couldn't answer them all, but I read a few each night before sleep. After so many lies, seeing others believe in good again felt like the best gift. One evening, when things had finally calmed, Noah stopped by. He carried a small drawing Lila made. She wanted me to bring this to you, he said quietly. I opened it. 3 figures in crayon, a little blonde girl, a silver-haired woman, and a man at a dinner table. Underneath, in careful letters, me, Grandma, Dad having dinner together. Noah stared at it a long time, tears falling, slow and heavy. He whispered, I wasted so much time learning that being a father isn't a right, it's a responsibility to love. I squeezed his shoulder. It's okay, Noah. What matters is you've started. This time, go all the way. That night, I stood at the window, porch lights spilling over the yard where Lila played with the white cat. Her laughter floated on the breeze. I smiled. Our journey isn't truly over, but at last justice made room for love. No more yelling, no more fear, just a father learning to grow up, a child learning to trust, and a grandmother, a little older, finally able to breathe easy in a sunset without shadows. 6 months after the trial, I realized time may not erase every scar, but it's long enough to learn to breathe, to smile, and to love again. Every morning I sit in the back row of the music room and watch Lila practice piano. When her small hands glide over the keys, Those clear notes sound like drops of light slipping through the window. Her hands are soft now, no more cracks. Lila laughs more, sleeps well, and no longer startles at night at remembered footsteps or shouts. Sometimes her teacher turns and says, "Mrs. Sharon, she really has a gift. She plays with feeling, not just technique." I smile. Maybe because she understands the value of peace better than most kids. Noah is still in father-child therapy and emotional management classes. Each week he sends a short text. This week Lila and I made pasta. She said I chopped tomatoes clumsily but still ate every bite. I reply, "Clumsy is fine as long as you made it yourself." He's no longer the man who earns money and checks out. He's learning to stay for dinner, for conversations, for teaching her to fold a blanket in the morning. I can see him growing up, not because the court says so, but because he wants to be the father Lila needs. One evening, I dropped by his place. On the kitchen table, 3 bowls of soup were still steaming. Lila was showing Noah how to sprinkle cheese. He worked and laughed as he asked her, "How about this, little chef?" The kid looked up and said matter-of-factly, "Dad, you added a little too much salt, but I'll eat it because you made it." I burst out laughing, and in that moment I realized we had saved not just a child, but also a man learning how to be a father from the beginning. Every Friday night I keep our little Whitaker family time at my house. No phones, no work. Just the dinner table, a few old board games, and laughter rolling through the open windows. We call it breathing hour, where everyone gets to be themselves. I read to Lila, and Noah makes dessert. Sometimes we just re-watch old movies, listen to jazz, or write the week's gratitude notes and drop them into a glass jar, a small habit I picked up from a parent support group. As for Mason and Toby, Vanessa's 2 sons, they're also being set up with individual counseling by Child Protective Services. I don't hate them, because they're just kids lost in the shadows of adults. If there's a chance, I still hope that one day Lila can play with them as friends, without resentment or fear. I spent a few weeks writing this whole story down, not to relive the pain, but to close a chapter with clarity. While writing, I understood one thing. Kindness doesn't mean unconditional endurance. A good person needs to know when to stop, when to speak up, and when to protect. I used to think love meant silence, swallowing things to keep the peace. But now I know prolonged silence only feeds the darkness. If I hadn't acted that day, Lila might still be scrubbing floors with those little hands, and I would live the rest of my life in guilt. Now I'm writing the last lines of this journal and calling it Whitaker's Promise. It's a promise that in this family, love must come with respect, and every child is allowed to make mistakes, but is never to be humiliated. I also sent a private letter to Vanessa through attorney Atticus. I don't know if she'll read it, but I wrote it sincerely. I don't hate her. I just hope she finds a reason to change. In the letter I wrote, "If you truly go to therapy and change, I'll be willing to ask the court to consider easing contact restrictions, not for you, but for your 2 sons. They need a mother too, but a mother who can love without causing fear." When I finished, I felt lighter. Forgiveness isn't forgetting, it's refusing to let old pain decide how you live on. One afternoon, while I was making tea, Lila looked up and asked, "Grandma, do I still have to scrub the floor?" I laughed, stroked her hair, and answered softly, "No, you just need to grow up happy." She smiled, carefree, as if she'd never known hardship. Then she turned back to the piano, her hands moving steadily across the black and white keys. Music filled the house, not loud, but enough for me to feel at peace. I closed my eyes and listened to each note, like each new breath of life. Sometimes in the evening I still step onto the porch and look at the lights spilling through the windows, a father and a little girl setting the table together. To me, that image is worth more than any victory. My fight wasn't to destroy it, was to renew, so those who remained could reset boundaries and relearn how to love. I once lost faith in justice and in people, but now, when I watch Lila sleep soundly every night, I know it was all worth it. Thank you for staying with my granddaughter and me till the end of this journey. Maybe you're hearing this story from far away in America, in the UK, or anywhere in the world. But if you've listened this far, I believe we share the same thing in our hearts. The belief that kindness needs boundaries, and every child deserves to be loved safely. I truly appreciate your presence. If this story touched your heart, please leave a comment, tell me where you're watching from, and what you think about Lila's journey. Every message you share can give strength to the grandmothers, fathers, and mothers out there fighting for their children. If you found it meaningful, please subscribe, hit like, and share this video. Sometimes just one story is enough to light the belief that gentleness can be stronger than any storm. Tonight, we'll have another little dinner. On the table are 3 chairs, 3 bowls of soup, and 3 smiles. Lila chats about her music class, Noah passes me a piece of warm bread, and I just sit there, listening to the laughter rising in the room. 3 people, 3 generations sharing dinner in warm light. And I know, after so many seasons of storms, this is the reward of love with boundaries, a peace that's real. That afternoon, Asheville was draped in cold rain, tiny droplets sliding down my hands as I stood at my son's gate. I carried a porcelain box, the birthday gift for my granddaughter. All I pictured was her throwing her arms around me like always, but as I neared the window, the laughter from inside made me freeze. It wasn't a child's laugh, it was my husband's. Through the slit in the curtain, I saw him on the sofa, pressed close to my daughter-in-law. Her head rested on his shoulder, her fingers tracing little circles on his collar like they were a pair of secret lovers. Papers were scattered across the coffee table, and I only caught my daughter-in-law's voice, sweet but cold. If you file for irreconcilable differences, we'll get at least half. And her old house. Let me handle improvements reimbursement. My husband chuckled, stroked her hair, and answered like he'd just signed my sentence. Linda never suspects a thing. She spent her whole life trusting people. I stood on the porch, stunned, hearing my heart crack under the rain. The box slipped from my hands, the lid shattered, the ring of porcelain on tile like a death knell for 40 years of marriage. I didn't knock. I pulled out my phone, hit record, took a long breath, and thought, they've shown their hand, now it's my turn to set the board. If you're still listening, tell me where you're watching from. Every comment you leave is another mark in this journey. And if this story has touched you, don't forget to hit like so it can reach even further. I stayed in the rain for a long while, my hands still shaking, whether from the cold or the truth that had just stabbed straight into my chest. I couldn't tell. The living room light kept spilling warm gold outside, where the 2 people I loved most were whispering how to take me down. I backed out of the yard, careful not to make a sound. Mud swallowed my shoes, my right one soaked through, but I felt nothing except emptiness. Back in the car, I sat in the dark with my hands on the wheel. Every sound seemed to die out, leaving only the cold wind through the frame and my heartbeat like a drum. I replayed the recording. Kelsey's voice, my daughter-in-law, rang clear through the speaker. She'll never suspect. Each word was a small knife, lodging deep in my memory. I looked into the rearview mirror and saw my own face. A 66-year-old woman, gray-streaked hair, lined skin, tired eyes. A retired teacher who had spent a lifetime teaching students about honesty, trust, and decency, never imagining I'd be betrayed inside the very home I built. I inhaled deeply, pulled up my phone, and saved the recording. Then I opened my notes app and typed the first line, March 7th, 5:42 p.m. Asheville. Victor present at Jason's house, present with Kelsey. Divorce papers on the table. Conversation indicates they are planning to seize assets. I typed each word slowly and firmly, like grading an ethics paper gone wrong. Driving off that little street, I kept my speed steady so no one inside would notice. I knew I couldn't act on emotion. They know the law, and they had surely anticipated my reaction. I had to stay one step ahead. When I got home, our house at the end of the lane by the pines, where Victor and I had lived nearly 40 years, his truck was where it always was, by the garage. Now I finally understood why, for months, he'd said, busy at the shop, tough clients, working late, all lies. I walked in. The diffuser still carried a faint lavender scent I always turned on at night. The quiet felt too heavy. The morning paper he'd left lay on the dining table, a huge headline. High-profile divorce in Charlotte, wife loses everything. I let out a small laugh. How ironic that I was living that very story. I made myself a cup of black tea, set my phone on the table, and began recording a memo to myself. It's 7 p.m. I, Linda Carver, am documenting what I saw and heard. If anything happens to me, this will be the first piece of evidence. Victor and Kelsey are planning a sham divorce to seize assets. I have audio, time, and location. This will not be the last entry. I saved the file and named it Evidence 01. The tea cooled, but my head felt clearer than ever. I took out my old brown-covered notebook I used for lesson plans and wrote a title in blue ink, Counterplan. I split the page into 4 columns. Evidence. Money trail. Timeline. Action plan. I started listing each point in detail. 1. Victor lied about being at the shop all day. 2. His truck appeared at Jason's house at 5:30 p.m. 3. Kelsey had divorce documents. 4. They discussed improvement reimbursement and asset division. I wrote until my hand ached, but each line made me feel a little stronger. On the table, an old family photo stared back, Victor beaming next to Jason on our trip to Maine, me holding Lily. I brushed my fingers against the frame. That photo used to prove love and family. Now it was just a reminder of my own naivety. I didn't cry. The tears had dried up along with my trust. I knew I couldn't let emotions lead. I had to go back to who I was on the podium, rational, steady, methodical. I opened my laptop and logged into the bank. Something was off. Lots of small withdrawals, hundreds here and there, spaced out every few days, something I'd never noticed before. I printed every statement, slipped them into a plastic sleeve, and labeled it Suspicious Finances. Then I changed passwords on every account: bank, email, insurance, even social media. I disabled location sharing, then turned on 2-factor authentication. That night when Victor came home, I pretended everything was normal. He opened the door, shook the rain off his coat, and said, "Rained all day. I was at the shop the whole time. The customer gave me a headache." I smiled and didn't answer. In my head, I logged it as a new entry. Repeated lie, 9:12 p.m., March 7th. He asked why I wasn't in bed yet. I said, "Waiting to have tea with you." I poured him tea, watched the steam rise, and wondered how many years I'd lived with a stranger I thought was my soulmate. After he went to shower, I opened my voice memos again and added, "Victor came home at 9:10. Feigned fatigue. Wouldn't look me in the eye." The at the shop story repeated. I saved the second file, Evidence 02. Before bed, I opened the notebook again and wrote the day's final line. No confrontation, no display of emotion. Collect. Record. Calculate. Counter. I set the pen down, closed the notebook, and looked out at the fogged window. The rain hadn't stopped, but inside me, something else had begun, not a storm of tears, but a plan born from pain and the mind of a woman who taught ethics and justice her whole life. The next day, I would start where I'm strongest: patience and discipline. They think I'm just a gentle old woman? They'll learn the first lesson soon. No one plays chess like a woman who spent 40 years in silence. The next morning, when Victor left, I stood at the window watching him go. Brown leather jacket, shoes polished to a shine, things he never cared about before. After 4 decades together, I knew he once used the cheapest soap and hated cologne. Yet now, the bedroom still carried a new scent. An expensive men's fragrance, a little sharp and heady, like what I've smelled at Macy's around Christmas. I went to the dresser and saw a small cologne bottle among his vitamins, the label brand new. "A gift from whom, Victor?" I whispered, but didn't wait for an answer. I noticed every small detail, the things I used to overlook because I trusted him. His shirts were now always crisply ironed, even with a crease down the sleeve, something he never did, since his shop is all grease and oil. He said he wanted to look sharper to keep up appearances with clients. I just nodded, but in my head I wrote, March 8th. Sign. Change in wardrobe habits. Reason not credible. At noon, I called the shop to confirm. The foreman, Jimmy, sounded surprised on the line. "He already left early, ma'am. Said he had personal stuff to handle." "Personal?" I repeated, keeping my voice even. "Any idea what it was?" "Not really. Just said he'd be back later." I thanked him, hung up, and sat still. Victor almost never used to leave mid-shift. He used to brag, "If the crew doesn't take a break, neither does the boss." That line now sounded like a joke. By afternoon, I didn't go straight home after tutoring. Instinct pushed me to swing by my son's neighborhood. Maplewood was quiet as always, maples casting shadows on the stone-paved walk. As I turned the corner, my heart stopped. Victor's gray pickup sat neatly in front of Jason's garage. I killed the engine, parked 2 houses down, and reclined the seat so no one would see me. Through the misted glass, I saw them. Kelsey stood on the porch, blonde hair spilling over her shoulders. Victor stood close enough that their breath could have mingled. She tilted her head up, said something that made him smile, the smile I hadn't seen on him when he looked at me in a long time. Then Kelsey reached up, adjusted his collar, her fingers sliding slowly across his shoulder, then down his chest, intimate. No words needed, no more proof required. I understood. I pulled out my phone, opened the camera, and snapped a few quick shots. Each one was a stab, but my hand stayed steady. I noted the time, 4:47 p.m. License plate, NC 237FK. I saved everything in a folder labeled Proof. Just as I went to start the car, the house next door opened. Jason's neighbor, Mrs. Collins, stepped out in a blue knit coat, mail in hand. She spotted me and gave a little wave. I lowered the window and tried to smile like usual. "Oh, Linda, didn't know you were dropping by today." "Yes, just bringing a little treat for Lily." She smiled, then lowered her voice like sharing a secret. "Well, Victor's here a lot. I figured you two were moving to be closer to your son." I kept my face neutral, but my hand tightened on the wheel. "Yes, maybe he's helping Jason with repairs." "That's nice, but you know, they seem very close, like a truly tight father-son pair." I only nodded, then quickly excused myself. As I drove off, her words echoed, "Victor's here often." That night when he came home, I set dinner like always, roast and mashed potatoes. He talked about busy days at the shop and grumbled about picky clients. I smiled and quietly served him another slice. Inside, I added a new line. Lie continues, 8:17 p.m. After he fell asleep, I gathered his laundry. In his coat pocket, I found a motel receipt. Green Valley Motel, Asheville downtown, dated last week. Time, from 1:20 p.m. to 5:10 p.m. I sat on the bed, hands trembling as I stared at the bold print, Room 214 paid in cash. There's no explanation that could excuse that. I tucked the receipt into an envelope, wrote the date, and hid it in the secret drawer of my desk. The papers were stacking up tiny pieces of evidence, but I knew each fragment would soon form the full picture. 2 days later, after Victor left, I pulled up our bank statements again. A pattern jumped out. Small withdrawals, only about $100 to $200 at the same ATM, less than a mile from Jason's house. Over the past 2 months, more than 10 such transactions. I printed the statements and marked each line in red pen. Every time I looked at the numbers, Anger rose not about the money, but the contempt. In the late afternoon, I sat by the window, sunset washing gold over the old wood floor. I glanced at the wedding photo on the wall, Victor in a black tuxedo, me in a puff-sleeved white dress. Back then he told me, "I'll never give you a reason to doubt me." I smiled faintly, a smile drained of feeling. I opened my phone and pulled up the photo folder. Porch snapshots, the motel receipt, statements, everything carefully filed. I named the folder Silent Storm. Each night I opened it and dropped in another piece, like a craftswoman patiently stitching each thread into the great fabric of truth. I knew I couldn't unload this pain on anyone else, not yet. Jason couldn't know. My son was buried in work and blind faith in the woman he loved, and I certainly couldn't let Kelsey realize I was awake now. She's a lawyer, sharp and calculating. One mistake, and I'd lose my chance to strike back. I pressed it all down, no crying, no shouting. Only the silence of someone who has lived long enough to know tears are a luxury, while composure is a weapon. Before bed, I pulled out a portable hard drive, backed everything up to the cloud, and set a new password. I also sent a copy of the folder to a backup email only I knew. Each small step felt like building a fortress around myself. Finally, I sat at my desk and wrote the 3 people I could trust. First, Daniel Whitaker, the lawyer who helped a friend get a fair divorce even though her husband was a big businessman. Second, Martha Hale, the accountant friend from my teaching days, practical and discreet. And last, Joan Reed, my former principal, who once told me something I never forgot. Sometimes, silence is the biggest lesson of all. I wrote their names down and gently closed the notebook. Outside, rain began again, whispering like someone reading out the errors of the past. I shut my eyes, listened to the rain blend with the tick of the clock, and knew that from now on, each passing day would be a new stitch cinching up the net of truth, and I, the woman they thought was old and naive, was quietly pulling the first threads. 3 days later, after Victor left for work, I grabbed my bag and slipped in every receipt, photo, and my notebook. I dressed plainly like always, but I knew, today, I wasn't the gentle, silent wife anymore. I was an investigator investigating my own marriage. Blue Ridge Community Bank sits downtown, where Victor and I opened a joint account more than 20 years ago. The teller I knew, Megan, greeted me with a polite smile. "Good morning, Mrs. Carver. How can I help you today?" I smiled back and set my ID on the counter. "I'd like full statements for the past 6 months on all accounts under my name and my husband's, plus any related transfers." Megan hesitated a beat. "Would you like paper or electronic copies, ma'am?" "Both. And I'll need them today." I saw her surprise, but she didn't pry. 15 minutes later, she brought over a thick stack. I sat at the waiting table, opened each page, and lightly penciled the odd transactions. Over 6 months, there were 24 small cash withdrawals, ranging from $100 to $400, totaling $7,800. They appeared almost weekly, mostly at the same ATM, the one on the corner near Jason's. I held the statement, a chill creeping up my wrists. I turned the page, Victor's secondary credit card. Transactions matched the timing. Le Chandelier Bistro, Hearth and Home Furniture, and Auburn Gifts, high-end spots I'd never set foot in, but I knew who had. I noted carefully, February 3rd, Le Chandelier Bistro, $248, dinner for 2. February 10th, Hearth and Home, $1,245, gray silk sofa. February 17th, Auburn Gifts, $389, crystal photo frame. I sat there over an hour, linking the timeline to Victor's late at the shop nights. Everything lined up a kind of perfection that made it hard to breathe. When I left the bank, the sun had begun to break through. Light filtered across the glass, making the statement shimmer like a mirror, reflecting a woman holding a map of her husband's sins. Back home, I brewed a pot of black coffee, opened my laptop, and entered everything into a spreadsheet. Date, amount, location, notes, flag. Line by line, the tiny text on the screen turned into a portrait of betrayal without a single confession. At 1 p.m., I called Martha Hale, my old friend, who once handled accounting for a law firm. Her voice was steady and warm as ever. "Linda? Long time. So, this is about money, isn't it?" I hesitated a few seconds, then told the truth. "Martha, I think Victor is hiding money, and I need to protect my share without tipping him off." Silence for a few beats. Then Martha spoke softly but firmly. "First, don't withdraw anything. Leave it as is. Let the trail stay clear. But open a new account in only your name at a different bank. And print every document. More is better." I did that this morning. "Good. And the house? That place was yours before marriage, right?" "Yes. I bought it with my mother's inheritance before the wedding." "Perfect. Then no one touches it if the deed stays solely in your name. Check the file, make sure there was no retitling into marital property." After the call, I went to my office, opened the safe, and pulled the deed. The line still read, "Linda May, Carver sole owner." I took photos, printed 2 copies, one for a folder labeled "Separate Property," one for my backup safe deposit box. While I was sorting papers, my phone pinged transaction alert. Victor just spent $1,700 at Riley's Jewelers. I didn't have to guess who the gift was for. I opened my inbox and hit print. Sheet after sheet slid out, each one evidence that couldn't be denied. I marked each page and arranged them by date. Every whir of the printer made the room feel heavier. By late afternoon, I stared at the pines behind the house, shifting color in the fading light. I remembered Victor standing out there cutting grass, wiping down the truck, smiling at me from a distance. Now it was only the hollow outline of a man I'd once trusted with my life. I closed the file, took a deep breath, and headed to Best Buy at the mall. I bought a Sony mini voice recorder, lighter size, clips to a pocket. I picked up extra memory cards and spare batteries. When the clerk asked, "Using it for lectures?" I smiled slightly. "No, to record the truth." On the way home, I pulled over, took out my notebook, and wrote, March 10th. Bought mini recorder. Purpose, collect audio evidence. Plan to use during a test conversation with Kelsey. I already had a plan to approach her not with rage, but with a mind game. A teacher who spent a lifetime on words would now use words to probe the one who betrayed her. That night, Victor came home late. He said traffic because of rain. I glanced at the clock, 9:30 p.m. His eyes slid away when I asked if he wanted dinner. He shook his head, said he'd eaten with a client. I only answered with a short, "Okay," then cleared the table. In my mind, the timestamps lined up like a spreadsheet ready to run. After he fell asleep, I sat alone in the living room. The house was so quiet I could hear the rain tapping the roof. I opened the laptop and added the day's final line. March 10th, Riley's Jewelers, $1,700, Victor's card. Conclusion, withdrawals and spending outside the marriage. I shut the laptop and leaned back. Part of me wanted to scream and confront him right then, but the rational part, the one I honed over 40 years of teaching, said something else. Don't rush. They're strong with words, but weak against evidence. And evidence, you have it. I looked up at the wall clock, the minute hand crawled, patient as I am now. The next day, I drafted my script to probe Kelsey. I'd swing by my sons with an excuse, bringing cookies. For Lily, and casually, share how a friend suspects her husband is cheating, then ask my daughter-in-law, a lawyer, a woman who's seen every divorce, for advice. She wouldn't suspect a thing. I still played the doting, naive mother perfectly. I wrote each innocent question. 1. If a husband hides money from his wife, what can the wife do? 2. What if the asset is a premarital house? 3. Is there a way to prove he used marital funds for personal purposes? I reread and tweaked every word, like prepping for the last lecture of my life, a lecture for myself. When I finished, I folded the paper and tucked it inside my brown notebook. In my head, everything was finally in order. I wasn't out for revenge. I was reclaiming the truth. And in a world full of lies, I knew only money doesn't lie. I turned off the lamp and looked out the window. The rain had stopped, yellow light pooled on the wet pavement. In the glass, my eyes no longer trembled. Maybe, for the first time in years, I saw the woman I used to be, a woman who can look straight at the truth, no matter how cruel it is. I used to think things like the cloud, GPS tracking, or anonymous email were just for kids. I taught grammar for 40 years and never needed to know how a phone worked beyond calling and texting. But now that my life had turned into an unofficial investigation, I knew I had to relearn it all, and this time, the syllabus was my survival. The first person I thought of was Noah, the 16-year-old next door, the Hendersons' son. Smart kid, he'd helped me reset the Wi-Fi a few months back. I waited until afternoon, saw him washing the car in the driveway, and called over. "Noah, do you have a minute? I need help with some tech stuff." He looked up, wiped his hands on his jeans, and grinned. "Of course, Miss Linda. I know you're the most dedicated student on the block." We sat on my porch. I laid out my phone, laptop, and the new mini recorder on the table. I want to learn how to record discreetly, store data safely in the cloud, and track a specific item like Find My iPhone, but for keys. Noah's eyes widened, amused. "Are you doing a project?" I smiled. "Yes, a project about honesty." He laughed and didn't pry. For 2 hours I learned how to set up an AirTag, sync it with my iPhone, and hide the app so no one would spot it. Noah also showed me how to set alerts if the tracked item moved outside a safe zone. I tested hiding the AirTag on Victor's keyring, the birthday gift he'd bragged about, because it's engraved with my name. I took a photo and tagged the first location. Garage, 5:52 p.m. He also showed me how to create a private folder in iCloud that only I could access. Use a password with letters, numbers, and symbols. Don't use birthdays or family names, Noah said. I nodded and wrote in my notebook like I was taking dictation. Don't let anyone guess I know. Before he left, Noah installed a movement tracking app linked to the AirTag and said, "Now, if the keys go anywhere, you'll know. Even when you're not home." I thanked him, handed over some fresh-baked cookies, and joked, "I'll never mark you down if you forget your homework." That night, I started testing the recorder. I clipped the tiny device inside my cardigan sleeve, then talked normally to myself to check the audio. After that, I tried it in my purse, in a water bottle, even tucked between books on the shelf. Each playback, I adjusted levels and found the clearest spots. It felt like lesson planning, except this time, I wasn't teaching students. I was teaching myself how to survive in a world of liars. When I felt confident, I opened my laptop and created a secret email address. No real name, no profile photo. I chose Old Bookshelf 89, my way of reminding myself I was still the bookish old teacher, not a detective in my own life. I uploaded everything there: audio files, photos, statements, receipt images. I also backed up my entire iMessage thread with Victor. Some texts looked harmless at first, but reading them again, I saw the layers of coldness dressed up as politeness. "I'm busy tonight. Sleeping at the shop. Don't wait up for dinner." Those aren't a husband's texts. They're a man splitting his time between two separate lives. For 3 nights straight, I tracked the AirTag data. Victor's schedule was almost down to the minute: 7 a.m. Out the door, 8 a.m. At the shop, noon leaving, 12:20 p.m., arriving in Jason's neighborhood, and back downtown at 5 p.m. One morning I printed the movement map and stared at the blinking blue dots like footprints of betrayal on the screen. I taped that map to the wall beneath a line. Truth doesn't need to shout, it just needs to be seen. On day 6, I decided to stage a Lily's birthday plan so I'd have a legitimate reason to be at Kelsey's house. I texted Jason, "I want to bring cookies and start decorating for Lily's birthday. Is this weekend okay?" Jason replied fast, "Of course, Mom. Kelsey said she's getting a gift for her too." I smiled. Everything was set. I'd arrive early with the recorder and a gift bag with a small pin cam clipped inside a brooch. I wasn't aiming to catch them in the act, but to capture how they looked at each other, how they spoke, how they performed the role of a perfect family. While prepping, I bought a doorbell camera with online storage. I told Victor I wanted more security because I heard about break-ins nearby. He agreed right away, not suspecting I needed a reason to see who came and went from my house each day. That evening, I installed the camera and checked the angle. Anytime Victor came home late, I could see him through the app. I studied his patterns, often sitting in the car for a few minutes, as if rehearsing the lie in his head. One night, I watched him wipe his collar with a tissue before coming inside. I zoomed in. There was a faint lipstick mark, bright red. I saved that clip and time-stamped it. What I felt now wasn't pain, it was cold clarity. Everything in my marriage fell into 2 buckets, data and target. If I let feelings in, I'd lose. If I stayed logical, I could force them to face their own consequences. Once I had enough, I drafted my first summary. Each line short and precise, like a case brief, 24 small cash withdrawals totaling $7,800. Restaurant, furniture, and jewelry receipts matching Victor's absences. AirTag pings matching Jason's address 4 days a week. Motel receipt and images of intimate interactions with Kelsey. Using the anonymous email, I sent the files to attorney Daniel Whitaker, Martha's contact I'd never met, only told he was principled and does not tolerate crooked lawyers. I wrote the subject, Case, Marital Asset Fraud Request Confidential Assessment. In the body, I kept it brief. I am a wife suspected of being deceived and having assets diverted. This is the initial data set. Please confirm receipt and protect my identity. When I hit send, my heart thumped once, then settled. No one knew what I'd just done. Victor was still asleep on the sofa with the news on. I looked at him, the man I once loved, now just a figure in my counterplan. I closed the laptop, turned off the lights, and stepped onto the porch. Asheville's night was quiet wind through the pines, warm lamplight on wet brick. In the dark, I didn't feel like a betrayed wife anymore. I felt like an older student who just passed her first exam in the digital age. I'd learned that technology isn't only for the young. It's the new language of truth, and once a teacher learns that language, no liar can outsmart her. Saturday morning, Asheville was clear as glass. I slipped a box of chocolate chip cookies into a tote and checked the mini recorder hidden under the napkin lining. The tiny red light blinked. Everything was ready. I looked in the mirror, fixed my hair, and smiled, not the smile of a victor, but of someone who has learned to hide her feelings. I got to Jason's right at noon. Kelsey opened the door, still pretty, makeup light but polished. She hesitated a beat when she saw me, then gave a polite smile. "Oh, you're early." Jason just ran out to grab a few things for lunch. "That's fine. I just brought some cookies for Lily. She loves these." I walked in, keeping my manner easy. The house still smelled like vanilla candles, soft music playing from the speakers. I noticed it right away. The living room sofa wasn't the old one. It was a gray velvet set, identical to the furniture receipt I'd seen on the statement. I brushed the edge and smiled. "Beautiful sofa. New?" Yeah. A designer friend gave me a discount," she answered a little too quickly. I sat, set the cookie box on the table, and began, "I've noticed Victor's been different lately." Kelsey tilted her head, her face shifting to practiced concern. "Different how?" Home late more often, says he's at the shop all evening, but he smells like cologne and his shirts are crisply ironed. Do you think it's normal for a 61-year-old man to change like that? She gave a small, sympathetic smile. Maybe he just wants to refresh himself. Men get scared of aging sometimes, so they pay more attention to how they look. I looked straight at her, calm. Maybe, but if a friend of mine suspects her husband is cheating and the other person is a relative by marriage, what would a lawyer advise her to do? Kelsey froze briefly, picked up her phone, fingers flying, probably a text. She replied in a more professional tone. Well, first she needs evidence, you know that. Then prep for asset division. If there's a house, land, or joint accounts, she should lock it all down. And if the husband tries to move money, the wife can ask the court to freeze assets. I nodded, attentive. What about a separate house? Say a premarital property. She arched a brow, clearly interested in the legal angle. Technically, separate property isn't split, but if there were upgrades, renovations, improvements during the marriage, and joint contributions can be proven, the other side can still claim reimbursement. Depends on how good the lawyer is. She sounded so confident, I could almost hear the arrogance. I feigned confusion. Wow, complicated. So if the husband has a strong lawyer, the wife could lose a lot? Kelsey smirked slightly. Not necessarily. What matters is who prepares first. If you plan it well, the person who understands the law won't lose anything. That line hit the quiet room like a pebble thrown onto a still lake. I felt every word, won't lose anything. It wasn't advice, it was the manifesto of someone practicing it. I still remember that moment, her confident smile, me just listening, steady as a lake. Not because I was weak, but because I already knew. Wind can blow words away, but it can't blow away evidence. What do you think about that moment? Is silence the strongest form of payback? Tell me in the comments, I truly want to know what you'd choose. I chuckled lightly, easy as small talk. Sounds like you've handled a lot of these cases, huh? She laughed softly, shrugged. Oh, it's the job. At my firm, divorces over assets happen all the time. I glanced down at the phone in my purse. The recording light was still on. Everything was being captured, every word. Right then, Lily burst out of her room, pigtails bouncing, clutching a plastic doll. She squealed, "Grandma, you're here." I opened my arms and kissed her forehead. The warmth softened me, but her next line cut cold. Grandpa came yesterday when Dad was at work. Mom said he was fixing the cabinet. The room went silent. I kept smiling, smoothing her hair. Really? Grandpa's very handy. Kelsey hurried up to gather cups, flustered. She's just chatting, Mom. Victor only stopped by to say hello. I looked at her, expression unchanged. Kids remember well. Sometimes better and more honestly than adults. The air grew heavy. I stood and glanced at my watch. I should get dinner started. I'll catch Jason another time. Kelsey nodded, voice stiff. Okay. Drive safe. I bent to kiss Lily again, keeping my voice warm. Keep Grandma's secret, okay? I'll bring cake next time. She giggled, oblivious to the storm gathering around her. Out at the car, my hands trembled slightly. I shut the door and took a long breath. My heart pounded, but I knew I couldn't let emotion win. I saved the recording. Length, 42 minutes. Clear audio. I played a few clips. Kelsey's steady professional tone, punctuated by her soft laugh. If joint improvements can be proven, the other side can claim a share. What matters is who prepares first. Won't lose anything. Those 3 lines, just 3, sketched the entire picture. I drove slowly down Maplewood, sunlight filtering through the leaves. In the rear view, I saw my reflection calm, but with something resolute in my eyes. The anger had settled, replaced by cold focus. I was no longer the one being fooled. I was becoming the one who keeps the record. At home, I unpacked, plugged the recorder into my laptop. The audio file appeared, waveforms neat and even. I renamed it Kelsey Interview 1, then filed it into Silent Storm. I sent a copy to Daniel Whitaker's anonymous intake email with a note: audio of discussion between female subject K and me, March 16th, duration 42 minutes. Content indicates intent to seize assets via improvements reimbursement. Please confirm confidentiality. I hit send and watched the screen. Mail sent successfully popped up tiny words with enormous weight. That night, Victor came home late, said there was a new client, needed negotiating. I nodded, pretended to be tired, and went upstairs first. Once the door closed, I opened my phone to the location app. The blue dot, the AirTag on his keys, was parked at the address I knew by heart, Jason's house. I smiled softly, not out of pain, but because I realized their secrets were now telling on themselves through the data. I didn't even need to ask. I opened my notebook and wrote one short line. Today, March 16th. Successful recording. Kelsey confirms legal knowledge and financial motive. Lily provides supporting detail. Collection phase nearly complete. I closed the notebook and set the pen down. Outside, a thin crescent moon hung low, silver light slipping through the curtains onto the spread of papers, evidence, maps, receipts, statements, all weaving the betrayal they themselves had authored. And I, the woman once dismissed as weak, was writing its ending with planned silence. I never thought I'd walk into a law office not to sign a contract or notarize a form, but to plan a counterattack against my own husband and daughter-in-law. But that morning, as Asheville's sun touched the tall panes of Whitaker and Associates, I knew there was no turning back. Daniel Whitaker's office was on the 4th floor, neat and bright, the smell of coffee mixing with new paper. He was in his 50s, tall, with silvering hair and gray eyes sharp enough to read my story before I spoke. When I set the thick folder on his desk, he nodded slightly and said, "Steady. Martha gave me a heads up. But I have to say, you've done a professional investigator's job. Your filing system is problem, something I could learn from." I gave a dry smile. "I'm only doing what I need to protect myself, Mr. Whitaker." He went sheet by sheet, statements, photos, audio, even the AirTag route maps I'd printed. Each time he nodded, a bit of weight lifted, not for the praise, but because I wasn't carrying this alone anymore. After nearly 20 minutes, he set his glasses down and looked at me. "First, we need to temporarily freeze the joint accounts. Based on this evidence, I can file for an emergency freeze due to suspected misuse of marital assets. Once frozen, all transactions stop immediately." I nodded. "I want that done as soon as possible. We'll do it Monday at 8:30 a.m. I'll draft the papers this afternoon, you just sign." He poured more coffee, voice even but careful. "As for Kelsey, this part is delicate. She's an attorney, which means ethical obligations. If you provide sufficient proof that she exploited family information for personal gain, I can file an ethics complaint with the state bar. That won't just ruin her reputation, she could be suspended." I tightened my grip on the cup, eyes on the desk. "I don't want to destroy anyone, but she destroyed my family." "I understand," he said slowly. "So we'll run 2 tracks. Plan A, reconciliation. You confront them in a family meeting, present the evidence, and give them the option to sign a quiet separation agreement. Plan B, if they push back, I file immediately. You have evidence, a potential witness, and legal grounds. They won't have room to maneuver." I was quiet for a few seconds, then asked, "Which do you think they'll choose?" "Smart people choose silence. Arrogant people choose a fight. From what you've described, they'll fight. That's better for us. Angry people confess for free." We mapped the steps. He wrote briskly. 1. Monday, 8:30 a.m. Freeze all joint accounts. 2. Monday, 9:15. Notify the bank and the insurance company. 3. Same day, 2 p.m. You'll sign a formal retainer so I can represent you. 4. Tuesday, prep the ethics complaint against Kelsey. Number 5. Wednesday, send the family meeting invitation our trigger point. When he capped his pen, I looked at the strong handwriting, each line nailing down the plan to win my fairness back. Before I left, he said, I'll need Martha to verify any home improvements they might claim. Have her audit receipts, materials, and actual timelines so we can counter precisely. That afternoon, I went to Martha's. Her small house was as tidy as ever, cinnamon in the air. After I laid it out, she nodded firmly. They want to say renovations? I'll show them what real books look like. If it was paid with your separate funds, I can prove every cent. She opened her laptop and a spreadsheet. How far back do you keep receipts? Since 2001. All in the file cabinet. Martha laughed and patted my hand. Then this is easy. No one beats a teacher who keeps her paperwork. We reviewed every item: paint, roof repair, hardwood flooring. Most were charged to my individual card. Her fingers tapped, then she said, Done. I'll write a detailed valuation memo for the attorney. And for the house value, hire an independent appraiser so they can't claim appreciation came from joint effort. That night, I came home, pulled the old property files. The deed still read, Linda Mae Carver Soleil ownership. Next to it, a 2019 appraisal. I snapped photos to send Martha and asked her to line up a current valuation for comparison. I also printed the legal authorization Daniel had emailed. Reading every line, my chest felt heavy but firm. After I signed, I sealed it in an envelope with a small rose stamp, the one I used to mark literature essays. An old habit, now a symbol of resolve. Late, I sat in my office, the desk lamp glowing on stacks sorted like textbooks. I opened my laptop and created a folder titled Phase 2 Counter-Strike. Each subfolder labeled Financial Evidence, Professional Ethics Evidence, Family Meeting Script, Temporary Lodging Emergency Plan. That last one made me pause. I knew if things spun out, I'd have to leave this house at least for a while. Not out of fear, but to work safely. I called my trusted friend, former principal Joan Reed. Joan, if I need a place for a few days, is your lakeside cottage free? She didn't hesitate. Always a room for an old friend, come whenever. Thank you, it may be soon. I ended the call and opened the window. Night was quiet, just crickets. I wondered how life veered this way from a wife planning meals to a woman planning legal strategy. Strangely, I wasn't afraid. When trust is gone, instinct and reason take over. Next morning, I got up early, brewed coffee, and prepped materials to send Daniel. When Victor stepped out of the bedroom, I kept the same calm as always. He asked, "You're up early?" "Couldn't sleep. I want to reorganize the file cabinet and get the tax binder ready." He nodded, not the least bit suspicious. I watched him head for the door, the key ring with the AirTag glinting in the sun. The blue dot on my phone's map would start moving again, leading me to places he never imagined were being tracked. I smiled not bitterly, just the smile of someone who knows she's holding the upper hand. That afternoon, I got a confirmation email from Daniel Whitaker. Received all documents. Account freeze order will be submitted at 8:30 a.m., Monday. Have your ID and the power of attorney ready to sign at the bank. After that, we'll plan the family meeting later in the week. Let them believe you're still the gentle woman they think they know. I reread the last line, let them believe. I don't think I've ever seen advice so perfectly true. That evening, I baked an apple pie, Victor's favorite. When he came home, I served it like nothing was wrong. He said, "This is great. You always know how to spoil me." I smiled and answered softly, "Sometimes I just want things a little warmer, before they go completely cold." He laughed, not understanding, and I looked down at the rich, fragrant slice of pie, thinking, in 2 days, you'll know what it feels like to lose everything. The night before Monday, I organized the files one last time and tucked them into a leather bag. On the sticky note outside, I wrote briefly, Monday, 8:30 a. Freeze. Wednesday family meeting. No trembling. No forgiveness. I turned off the light and sat in the dark for a long moment. Moonlight slipped through the curtains and fell across my hand, the hand that had cooked meals, written lesson plans, wiped my son's tears. Now it was about to sign the paper that would change our family's course forever. But maybe justice doesn't always come from a courtroom. Sometimes it comes from a woman who stands up quietly at the right time. Monday morning, 7:45. I sat in the kitchen with a cup of coffee, looking out at the garden still covered in dew. Everything was quiet, except the clock ticking like a countdown. Next to me, my phone showed a new email from Blue Ridge Community Bank. Confirmation of temporary legal hold on accounts. I read that line over and over, feeling like I'd just laid the first brick of a protective wall. Right at 8:30, per Daniel Whitaker's plan, all joint accounts for Victor and me were completely frozen. Every transaction, credit card, auto transfer, everything stopped at once. I pictured Victor at a gas station, swiping his card like usual, and the machine saying, "Transaction declined." He'd probably think it was a glitch. But in a few hours, he'd learn the error wasn't in the machine, it was in his choices. 9:55. My phone buzzed. Victor's name lit the screen. I answered slowly. "Linda? Can you check what's going on? My card won't run. The ATM's failing too. Even the auxiliary business account is locked." I kept my voice even. "Really? I'll call the bank and ask. They're probably doing maintenance, but it's weird my other joint account is down too. Can you call them for me?" "Sure, I'll check, don't worry." His voice shook a bit, though he tried to sound calm. I heard typing and a car door slam. He was probably trying to pull cash somewhere. When the call ended, I checked the time exactly 10 a.m. Step 1. Perfect. At 11 a.m., the phone rang again. This time it was Kelsey. "Hi, Mom," Victor said. "There's an issue with the accounts. I have a friend in the banking system who can take a quick look. If you give me the account numbers, I can call them to speed things up." Her tone was soft, but every word felt like a probe. I let a pause sit, then answered slowly, "Oh, that's kind. But I think it's just a technical mix-up. I'll call the bank, no need to trouble you." "Mom, banks are usually slow to respond. I just need a few minutes." I cut in gently but firmly. "It's okay. I prefer speaking directly." I put the call on speaker and dialed the bank's customer service right in front of her. She didn't know I had auto record turned on. "Hello, this is Linda Carver. Our accounts were just frozen. I'd like to know why." The woman on the other end spoke clearly. "Yes, Miss Carver. I see the freeze was initiated this morning under our customer protection protocols due to a pattern of suspicious small withdrawals and transfers to an unidentified third party. The hold will remain until verification." I pressed my lips together to hide a smile and asked as if I were truly surprised, "Oh, thank you. Is there any way to lift it?" "No, ma'am. This requires both account holders to appear with identification and the presence of legal counsel. We will contact attorney Daniel Whitaker's office listed on file." Beside me, Kelsey went rigid. I watched the color drain from her face. I turned to her, voice light as small talk. "Did you hear that, dear? They said it has to go through my attorney. Good thing he's already reviewing these transactions for me." She forced a laugh. "Ah, I see. Must be a misunderstanding. I'll have Victor call back later." "Sure. But one more thing." I looked her straight in the eye, still mild. "When dealing with a bank, transparency is best. Their systems track closely. Even the tiniest things leave a trace." She swallowed hard, gripping her phone. She was trying to hold it together, but her eyes were pure panic. I poured more tea and slid a cup toward her. This afternoon I'd like you and Jason and Victor to come over for tea just to talk as a family. It's been a while. This afternoon? Yes. There are a few things I want to discuss before it all goes too far. She nodded, struggling to smile. Okay, I'll let Jason know. Thanks. I'll send a formal invitation with Daniel present as well. To keep it proper. I saw her gaze darken for a second. The woman who thought she controlled the board was now in my house, hands shaking around a teacup. I didn't need to shout or threaten. One phrase, "my attorney," was enough to tell Kelsey the board had tipped. After she left, I called Daniel Whitaker and recapped everything. He gave a low chuckle, steady as if he'd predicted it. Told you they'd call immediately. They can't stand losing control. Now just wait. I'll send a formal meeting invite for 4 p.m., co-signed by me. Perfect. I want it to feel like a simple chat, but when they arrive, they'll realize it's a hearing. I heard his soft laugh. You have a strategist's instinct, Linda. No. I'm just a wife who trusted too much. At noon, Victor came home. His face was dark, sweat beading on his forehead. Did you call the bank? I've been shut down all morning. Our accountant says the accounts are closed. I feigned confusion and poured him a glass of water. I did. They said there were suspicious transactions. Maybe someone's been using the accounts improperly. Improperly? He frowned. What's that supposed to mean? Small, repeated withdrawals, then transfers to a third party. They said they'll go over it with my attorney. We should know more tomorrow. He stared at me, shocked and a little afraid. For the first time in months, he couldn't hide. The confident posture, the calm tone gone. I stayed seated, smiling as I slid the invitation across the table. This afternoon, I've invited you, Jason, and Kelsey over for tea. We need to talk. He glanced at the paper and saw Daniel Whitaker's signature. His mouth trembled. You actually hired a lawyer? Yes. Sometimes to keep the peace, you need a witness. He said nothing, eyes darting away, then grabbed his keys and left without another word. I watched him go, feeling no old ache. When the door closed, I exhaled and carefully folded the second invitation for Kelsey and Jason and slipped it into an envelope. I emailed a copy to Daniel. Subject line, Carver family, meeting at 4 p.m. Today, attorney present. In the body, I wrote briefly, requesting full attendance of all parties. This meeting is conciliatory in nature before proceeding with further legal steps. After sending, I stood and set the tea table. The house was quiet again, only the steady tick of the clock. I looked at the white porcelain cups and polished each one. Everything had to be perfect, because this afternoon, in this room, the truth would be poured like hot tea, impossible to take back. I smiled faintly. They think I'm gentle, fragile. But they forget, once that woman learns to control the money, the very thing they used to control her, the whole game changes. Outside, sunlight slanted through the window, spilling across the table. I topped off the kettle and listened to the soft boil. A new chapter was about to begin, and this time, every card was in my hand. That afternoon, Asheville's sky wore a thin veil of clouds, a pale light that made everything in the house look as if it were waiting. I set the tea in the living room, the place that had been the calm heart of our family, now a temporary hearing room for the most important confrontation of my life. On the table, between the white cups and the jasmine pot, I laid a black folder in neat order. Inside was everything I'd gathered over 3 weeks: the money tracker, motel receipt, furniture invoices, photos, recordings, location data. Each sheet was a sharp, cold slice of truth. At 4 p.m., sharp, a car stopped out front. I looked out. Victor with Jason and Kelsey. All three stepped out, their faces tight. I opened the door, voice easy. Come in, the tea's just ready. No one answered. Jason tried a strained smile. Kelsey stared at her phone like it could shield her. Victor paused when he saw the formal invite with the law office logo on the table. I seated them, poured tea, then said calmly, "Before we start, I want you to know this conversation is being recorded legally. It's to prevent misunderstandings. No one leaves until we're done." Victor looked up, color draining. "Linda, what is this? You turning the house into a courtroom?" "No, just opening a black box, the one holding everything you thought you'd keep hidden forever." I opened the folder and pulled out the first financial summary. Here are the last 6 months of statements, 24 small cash withdrawals totaling $7,800, all from the joint account. "Can you explain why each withdrawal lines up with restaurant and furniture receipts and the address of Hearth and Home?" Victor said nothing. Jason looked at his father. Kelsey shifted, fists tight around her phone. I went on, steady and clear. "And here's the Green Valley Motel receipt, room 214, cash payment. March 8th. That day you told me power outage at the shop, had to stay and watch the machines. I checked the AirTag on your keys. It sat at that exact location for over 4 hours. Victor lifted his head, lips pressed, eyes avoiding mine. "You were tracking me?" "No, I learned to protect myself." "And this?" I slid another printout as a photo of the red lipstick on your shirt collar. The shade matches Crimson Rose, the one Kelsey uses. I noticed it on her vanity that same day. The room froze. Jason's voice cracked. "Mom, what are you saying?" I looked at my son, softer for a moment. "I didn't want to, sweetheart. But silence is complicity. And I can't be complicit in wrong." I turned to Kelsey, opened my laptop, and played the recording. Her voice filled the still air. "If joint improvements can be proven, the other side can claim a share. What matters is who prepares first. Won't lose anything." Kelsey went pale, lips trembling. "You recorded me, Mom?" "I was just speaking in theory." "Really? That's odd, because right after that, a motel booking email from Kelsey, lawfirm@gmail, matches the exact time the AirTag shows Victor on site. I have the screenshots, and the IP address matches Jason's home Wi-Fi." Jason shot to his feet, hands shaking. "Kelsey?" She grabbed his hand. "Jason, let me explain." I cut in, still calm. "No need. I also have confirmation from Mrs. Collins, the neighbor. Across the street. She saw Victor at your house at least 3 times a week while you were at work. She even snapped the license plate, thinking a stranger kept showing up." Victor stared at his lap, fingers knotted. Jason sagged back into his chair. I knew this would wreck him, but truth waits for no one. I slid over Martha's valuation. "These are the home improvement costs you plan to use for reimbursement. Every item paid from my separate account, with my signature on deliveries. This house is entirely separate property. No one has a right to even a percent." Kelsey bit her lip, eyes wet, but I saw no remorse, only fear. I pushed the final set of papers to Victor, a separation ultimatum. "Victor, I've already signed. You keep the shop and the truck, they're your labor and contribution. But this house, my mother's house, where I've lived all my life, you won't touch it. If you sign today, I won't pursue criminal charges for financial abuse or interference with ownership. If not, my attorney files in the morning." He opened his mouth, and I lifted my chin, voice cooler. "And before you say anything untrue, remember this is being recorded legally. I've filed notice of recording with counsel. No one leaves until we're done." The air thickened. I could hear the clock ticking like the house's heartbeat. I looked straight at Kelsey, voice low but firm. "As for you, I've filed an ethics complaint with the North Carolina Bar for using your legal knowledge for personal gain within the family. They'll investigate. Maybe it's a suspension, maybe disbarment, that depends on what you choose today." Her mouth fell open, lips quivering, hands laced as if to hide them. Jason stared at his wife, eyes full of hurt and disappointment. I stood and gave a small signal. The door opened and Daniel Whitaker walked in, jacket crisp, file case in hand. He glanced around, nodded to each of them, and sat beside me. His voice was low and steady. "I represent Mrs. Linda Carver. This meeting is formally noted in the civil record as a witnessed family conciliation. Objective: reach a voluntary separation and confirm asset allocation. From this moment, all statements carry legal weight. If anyone leaves, it's considered a forfeit of response." Victor sat rigid. Kelsey hung her head, tears starting. Jason watched me, torn in two. I knew he was breaking, but at least he would see with his own eyes, not through someone else's sweet lies. Daniel reviewed the record I'd assembled. I didn't interrupt. I just watched my hands around the warm teacup, lighter than I'd felt in years. After 40 years of blind trust, for the first time, truth was on my side. When he finished, he said clearly, "Mrs. Carver offers 2 options: sign the separation today or the case proceeds to county court. All parties are advised to limit statements to avoid aggravating factors." Silence stretched so long I could hear the wind outside. Then Victor nodded slightly, voice rough. "I'll sign." I didn't smile or nod. I set the pen in front of him and said quietly, "Good." "And you, Kelsey?" I met her eyes. "I don't need an apology. I just need you to leave my son's life and let him heal. As for your career, let the bar decide," Kelsey cried. Head down. Jason sat still, eyes wet. I had no tears left. I only wanted the long afternoon to end so the house could have the quiet it deserved. Daniel gathered the file, verified each signature, then asked, "This meeting is concluded. Copies will be retained with my office and the county court. Mrs. Carver, anything to add?" I looked around the room that had been this family's heart. The photos on the wall, wedding, birthdays, vacations were still there, but their meaning had changed. I answered softly, "No. Everything that needed saying the truth has already said it for me." Daniel nodded. He stood, packed the papers, and I closed the black folder, my own black box. It held not just evidence of betrayal, but proof I'd stopped being passive. When the door shut behind them, the house fell silent, with only a trace of jasmine tea in the air. I sat, closed my eyes, and knew every last lie had been stripped bare. Right after Daniel left, the room sank into a heavy quiet. No more crisp legal voice, no more shuffling papers. Only Kelsey's ragged breaths, broken, shaky, like someone trying to catch the last bit of air. She slumped in the chair, hair falling over half her face. The perfect makeup from earlier had streaked black mascara blending with tears. Her hands shook around her phone. When she finally looked up, those eyes weren't arrogant anymore. They were the eyes of someone who'd lost everything, searching for anything to cling to. I stood without a word. Each step on the hardwood sounded dry and final, like a gavel dropping. I opened a drawer and took out a small, carefully folded paper. It was Lily's drawing I kept in my wallet, the one she made in preschool last week. The family standing in the yard, and in the left corner, a tiny figure with a tear running down her cheek. When I asked, Lily had said, "That's Grandma. She's sad because no one wants to play with her." I set the drawing on the table, right in the space between me and Kelsey. "She doesn't understand grown-up things," I said slowly, each word etched into the air, "but kids feel the cold. They know when a smile is fake, when someone is lying." Kelsey stared at the drawing and broke into sobs, head in her hands. No defense left, no excuse strong enough. Victor sat still, as if waking from a trance. He looked at the separation document, the pen shaking in his hand. I didn't rush him or speak. When he finally signed, the scratch of the pen sounded like the period at the end of 40 years. He set the pen down, voice hoarse. "I have nothing left to say." "Right," I answered softly, "because everything you ever said lives in the evidence you left behind." I poured more tea, but no one touched it. I turned to Kelsey. "I won't stop you from seeing Lily, But from now on, every visit goes through Jason and family counsel. I'm limiting contact with my granddaughter until there's a new court order. You're not allowed to be alone with her. Kelsey nodded through tears, voice cracking. Mom, I'm sorry. I didn't know it would end like this. I cut her off, my eyes cold as glass. You knew. You just didn't think you'd get caught. Jason sat still between us, hands clamped over his head. My son's face was pale, eyes red from tears and shock. He looked at his father, then his wife, like he couldn't fit those two images into the same reality. No way, Jason muttered. My dad and my wife? No one answered. Only a long, heavy silence, the kind where you can hear maple leaves falling on the porch. I knew, in that moment, my son's heart was breaking just like mine once did. I stepped closer, set my hand on Jason's shoulder, and gave it a gentle squeeze. None of this is your fault, Jason. Don't make yourself carry more. Adults forget that what they do doesn't just break a marriage, it breaks the trust of the innocent. Jason choked up and dropped his head onto my shoulder like a child. I let him cry, my hand moving slowly across his back, feeling pain and relief at the same time. I knew I had saved one thing, the truth, even if it cost the rest of this family. Victor stayed seated, staring into nothing, no trace of the man who once said, "I'll protect you for life." Now he was just an old outline, alone in the wreckage he made. Daniel came back after a few minutes with his case. He spoke quietly to me. I've completed the confirmations. All documents will be filed with the court in the morning. The assets are divided exactly as you proposed. I nodded. He looked around the room with kind eyes but didn't interfere. As he gathered the files, he slid each page into the leather case, then turned to me. You should change every password today. I'll send a security template prevents unauthorized access. I know, I said, and I will. Bank to phone, email too. When Daniel left, I turned back to clear the table. No one said a word. I heard Victor get up and pull the small suitcase I'd already placed by the door. I'll go now, he said hoarsely. I won't come back. I didn't look at him. That's the best thing you've ever done for me. The door closed. A small sound, but inside me, it thundered. Kelsey staggered onto the porch and pulled out her phone. I heard her voice, strangled with tears. Jason, I'm sorry. I was wrong. It's my fault, not yours, not anyone else's. Jason looked at her, his cheeks still wet. I don't know what to believe anymore, Kelsey. I don't know how long I've been living in a lie. She tried to touch his hand, but he stepped back. Not out of hate, because an invisible wall had gone up between them. Love, when betrayed, doesn't shatter like glass right away. It fissures first, then goes numb. Kelsey turned away, crying without sound. Jason stood there like someone who'd lost his bearings. I wanted to say something, but there's no sentence strong enough to mend that. Finally, I said, take a few days, don't stay here. Go to a friend's place or back to your old campus. I'll handle the rest. He nodded, eyes rimmed red. When they both left, the house was quiet enough to hear the clocks tick. I gathered the cold teacups, stacked the leftover folders, and locked them in the office safe. I changed every password, account by account, bank, email, cloud, even an old social media login. I updated security questions, removed old links, and turned on two-factor authentication. Daniel had said, whoever controls information controls the board. I understood that now more than ever. When I finished, I opened the cabinet, took the black file, the one I called my black box, sealed it in a waterproof bag, and drove to the bank. I placed all evidence and original papers in a safe deposit box at the main branch. The banker asked, "Anyone besides you authorized to access this?" I smiled faintly. "No one, just me." On the way home, I lowered the window and let the wind through my hair. Asheville cooled toward evening, but I felt a strange calm. I had lost a marriage, lost trust, lost the illusion of a perfect family. In return, I'd gained freedom, the thing I didn't know I was missing. When I parked at the gate, I looked up at the house, now empty. The last light of day came through the frame, catching tiny dust motes in the air. Maybe tomorrow I'd clean everything, repaint the walls, set a few new pots of flowers. The masks had fallen, the truth was bare, but it was also the first light after years of dark. I shut the car door and gripped my keys. Inside, the house waited for me, quiet, clean, and for the first time, entirely mine. In the days after, my home was quiet again, but not the suffocating kind. It was order and calm, like after a storm when the wind has passed and the ground still smells of rain. I stood in the living room with morning light coming through the windows, dust drifting in the air, dust I hadn't noticed for years because I was too busy, trusting. On the far wall hung our wedding photo, me in white, Victor in a black tux, two young people smiling with the naivete of forever love. I took it down. The dark wood frame left a lighter rectangle, a scar of memory. I wrapped the photo carefully, put it in a box, and sealed it. Not out of hate, but to make room for new light. I repainted the room a warm cream that let the house breathe. With each stroke, I wiped away old layers, not just paint, but silence, hurt, and lies that had clung to these walls. I changed the curtains, reset the desk, arranged the shelves, and hung up the landscape Lily drew for me. Grandma and me in the garden. It was simple, but when I looked at it, I felt a joy I'd forgotten. I decided to turn the house into a literature classroom. Every morning, I held a small class for older neighbors, people who'd left school for life and children. We read Shakespeare, Dickinson, Frost, and sometimes wartime love letters. They told me they came not just to learn, but to remember how to keep living. Maybe I was learning that too. One April afternoon, Jason came back. He'd lost weight, but his eyes were lighter. He stood at the door, a suitcase in hand. "I'm coming home for a while, Mom. Lily needs a quiet place." I only nodded and opened my arms. We hugged for a long time. I didn't say welcome home because it had never stopped being his home. With Jason back, the house had laughter again. After therapy sessions Daniel helped arrange, Lily started sleeping through the night, fewer bad dreams. She sang and drew again, only now her pictures didn't have Grandma crying in the corner. We gardened together. Each morning, Lily and I planted another row of white daisies. Jason fixed the fence and repainted the gate. In his eyes, I saw a light I hadn't seen for a long time, the light of someone learning to forgive himself. I also saw a therapist, as Daniel suggested. Dr. Marion, silver hair and a steady voice, told me, "Linda, forgiveness doesn't mean accepting what they did. Forgiveness means you let yourself move on without carrying them in every step." I wrote that in my notebook. At night I'd reread it and add, "I didn't seek justice for revenge. I sought it so I could rest." When the legal work was done, I set up a trust for Lily. The house, savings, and small investments would slash and did all be hers when she was grown. I didn't leave anything to anyone else, not out of spite, but to end the loop of grabbing and dependence. Lily deserved a future that starts with trust, not suspicion. As for Kelsey, I had no contact. Daniel told me the disciplinary process was underway. The ethics committee had opened a review, my recordings included. Maybe she'd be suspended, maybe worse. I didn't feel happy or sad. Everyone learns their own lesson, the one they choose. Victor still ran the little shop outside town. None of us reached out. I wasn't angry anymore, but I didn't need to forgive either. We all have our roads, and mine was clear, now straight, with no one else's shadow. Summer came, and the neighborhood buzzed again. Neighbors brought apple pie, strawberry jam, and handwritten cards. "We admire you, Linda. Thank you for showing us courage has no age." I lined the cards on a shelf, each one a small piece of returned faith. At night, After Lily fell asleep, I sat by the window and wrote a journal called Lessons from the Marriage Class. I didn't write about betrayal. I wrote about what survives loss, self-respect, clarity, and the strength to stand up. I wrote, "Love is a long class. Some graduate with honors, some walk out empty-handed. But if we listen closely, even wounds can teach us something." I sent a draft to the local paper, and they ran it in the Life After 60 section. People called and wrote to say my story helped them leave bad relationships. I wasn't a hero, just someone who finished her own lesson. Then, one late fall afternoon, Lily turned 6. We made a chocolate cake and lit 6 small candles. As she closed her eyes to wish, Jason and I shared a look without words. The 3 of us blew out the candles together. The little flames died, and the white smoke curled up like an old spirit finally released. Lily cheered. "Grandma, Mom says when you blow out candles you have to make a secret wish." I smiled. "So what did you wish for?" "That you'll always be here, so I can tell you stories every night." I pulled her close, her hair smelling like sunshine. On the porch, white daisies trembled in the wind. Inside me, not the scar of betrayal anymore, but a new foundation built from old bricks. I said softly, a closing line to all those long months, "Grandma will always be here, Lily." Some women, when their house collapses, don't leave, they rebuild it, stronger, brighter, and full of love. That was the day I knew I'd walked the whole painful road and stepped into a new one where freedom, trust, and peace were the fair rewards for someone who rose in the ruins. November in Asheville, the season turned. Trees along Montford Avenue switched colors, red like coals after summer's fire. I stood at the classroom window and watched Lily play in the yard with neighborhood kids. She laughed, circling the white daisies we planted in spring. No one would guess this house had once been a battlefield of lies. That morning, pouring a second cup of tea, the phone rang. Unknown number, familiar tone. "Mrs. Linda Carver, I'm the assistant with the North Carolina State Bar Disciplinary Committee. We're calling with the result of the investigation into Miss Kelsey Moore." I held my breath. "Yes, I'm listening. After reviewing the file, recordings, and evidence you provided, the council has decided on a 5-year suspension and requires restitution of legal costs and a civil damages payment to you, per court order." I didn't cheer or glow. I set the cup down and let the steam drift like a long sigh. Some wins need no applause, only the return of calm. A week later, Daniel stopped by with a thick file. The county court's approval of the property agreement between Victor and me. The house, savings, and Lily's trust all in my name. He set the pen down and said evenly, "You can rest now. It's officially closed. No one can touch these assets." I nodded quietly. He understood I didn't need more words. The court also issued a restraining order against Victor 300 feet from my house, no expiration. When Jason heard, he said only one thing, "This should have happened sooner, Mom." I saw some of the weight lift from his eyes. He was learning to stand without bitterness. Once the paperwork had seals, Jason filed for divorce from Kelsey. I knew it wasn't easy. Logic says yes. The heart splits again. But this time, my son walked straight, no longer led by blind love. I went with Jason to the first hearing. Family court wasn't crowded, just the scratch of pens and the smell of new paper. When the judge asked, Jason spoke with steady restraint. "I'm seeking custody of Lily, Your Honor. She deserves to grow up in a healthy environment." The judge scanned the file and nodded. Evidence of Kelsey's ethical violations made everything clear. By the end, the judge ruled, temporary custody and educational decision-making to Mr. Jason Carver. Mother's visitation with supervision, up to twice a month. I couldn't hold back tears, but this time they were relief. I hugged my son outside and whispered, "You did it, Jason." "It's going to be okay," he answered, voice shaking. "I still have a place to come home to because of you, Mom." News moved quietly through the neighborhood. No gossip, just understanding. People looked at me with that quiet respect saved for those who walk through fire without burning. Victor, Daniel said, sold the machine shop, liquidated the rest, and moved to Tennessee, maybe to start over, maybe to escape the eyes of the past. I didn't ask more. Sometimes leaving is punishment enough. Kelsey left the state after losing her license. A friend said she's working at a small office in Missouri, teaching legal skills to students. I don't know if that's true. I only hope that when she lectures, she remembers the law isn't a shield for deception, it's a hand for protecting justice. With the old faces gone, my life turned a new page, quiet but meaningful. One early winter day, the president of the Asheville Women's Club visited my class. Afterward, she smiled. "Linda, we'd like you to share your story at our next workshop. Topic is financial self-defense for older women. No one can tell it as plainly as you." I hesitated, then agreed. The next week, I stood in a room of women in their 60s and 70s, silver hair, kind smiles, and that light I recognized in myself, fear and hope together. I told my story without anger, just steady. I talked about catching financial fraud inside a family, protecting accounts, and most of all, protecting trust. I explained family fraud investigation in simple terms. Sometimes the person who deceives you isn't a stranger. But the law still stands with whoever tells the truth. Someone asked, "Do you regret doing all that?" I smiled. No, justice isn't for revenge. It's how you close a chapter without bowing your head. The talk ended with long applause. An older woman squeezed my hand, eyes wet. "Thank you, Linda. Because of you, I'm checking my joint account tonight." I laughed and squeezed back. "That's a good student." That night, back home, I opened my laptop and looked at the documents that ended the long stretch: the restraining order, asset decree, suspension decision, and custody order, all tidy in a folder named Justice. I printed one copy of each, bound them, and set them on the shelf next to my favorite classics. Lamplight hit the glass, highlighting the first line on the file: Linda Carver versus Victor Carver and Kelsey Moore, Civil and Family Case, 2025. I ran a hand over the title, not with bitterness, but with rare peace. Lily ran in and hugged my legs. "Grandma, can I tell the class tomorrow how you teach?" "Justice?" I laughed. "Justice, huh? Do you know what that is?" She tilted her head, thinking, then said, "It's when the bad person says sorry to the good person." I hugged her, laughing through tears. "Close enough, Lily." But sometimes justice doesn't need an apology. It comes quietly, sealed with a red stamp. That night, I wrote the final page of Lessons from the Marriage class. Justice isn't loud. It doesn't always arrive with a gavel or late apologies. It arrives in documents, signatures, and restored trust, and when it does, the once deceived can lift her head, smile, and move on without regret. I closed the notebook, blew out the small candle, and looked around the house, once a battleground, now a sanctuary of truth. A cold breeze moved across the porch, carrying the last leaves of fall, and I knew justice had arrived quietly, but right on time, like a guest I'd been waiting for my whole life. I never thought I'd start over at this age on my own, but not alone. People ask if I'll remarry. I just smile. After a lifetime learning love, I know some things last longer without a chain. Happiness is simple now. Lily's laughter in the yard, Jason calling, "Mom, I made tea," and late afternoons with my literature group. They come not just to read, but to learn to love themselves again, just as I did. I spend more time in the garden out back, rows of white daisies, purple lavender, and tulips from last spring. Every morning I water them and watch dew gather on the leaves. When Lily plays, I show her how to plant seeds and tell her flowers are like people, they need light and rain to grow. The anger is gone. Forgiveness doesn't excuse the betrayer. It frees me from the chains of the past. Forgiveness doesn't erase pain, but it lets me walk past it without carrying the rage. Sometimes, on quiet nights, I stand in the hall and watch Lily sleep. She's curled in her pink blanket, breathing evenly, face soft as an angel. I smile. Every loss, every wound worth it if it leads to this. Peace without pretending. On Sunday morning, I hung a small wooden sign on the porch. Hand-carved letters, white paint on old oak, "Only truth lives here." I ran my fingers over each stroke, like touching a promise to myself. In this house, there's no room for lies, fear, or dependence. Only honest love and trust built with time. That afternoon, I sat at my desk and wrote a letter to myself. Linda, you've walked the longest road of your life from naive to awake. You won not with hate, but with clear thinking and steady heart. You kept what mattered most: honor, freedom, and light inside. I folded the letter into Lessons from the Marriage class. Outside, Asheville light slipped through the curtains in golden lines across the hardwood. I closed my eyes and listened to wind in the branches and Lily humming somewhere in the yard. 40 years. All the ups and downs and wreckage just to learn something simple. A house doesn't keep people for long. A house keeps only the truthful. And this morning, as sunlight crossed the frame and warmed my cup, I smiled. The final exam of my life graded. Thank you for walking with me to the very end of this road. If you're still here, it means you listened not just with your ears, but with your own scars, memories, and lessons. I tell this not to reopen pain, but to remind us, even after betrayal, we can stand without losing our dignity. Because justice isn't just in a courtroom, it's in the way we choose to live the rest of our days, peaceful, self-respecting, and without hate. And if this story made you feel seen or stronger, please like, subscribe, and turn on the bell so we can keep going together, sharing stories of strength, grace, and the small miracles of everyday life. I'm grateful you listened and stayed like a quiet friend sitting with me in this small house, reminding me there are still hearts that understand and believe in the good.